Okay, let's try this again. Let's see what's going on this time. So far, so good. Of course, we are gonna get hit with another ad break, so... So unfortunately, that's gonna be a little bit more of a delay before we get started. That does give me more time to pop back into the NASA Twitch. If you guys want, you guys should check out the NASA Twitch. There we go. Okay, so check them out while the ad break for here plays, and then come right back. All right, come right back for some edumacation. We're Bink back. Let me unpin this message. But yeah, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have another ad break. I'm not seeing the alert for it so far, but I can keep on yapping while we do that. Dude, this is so cool. The Artemis astronauts are back. They're also back. They're also Bink back in Pog form. This is so cool to see. All the NASA emotes. I like the Moonjoy one. I like the moon hugging and the Moonjoy. Let me put that on real quick. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Come on. Come on. Oh, do you have to like be subscribed to NASA in order to use it? Come on, NASA. Or I guess there's the NASA Sparkle one. Yeah, there you go. How about this? Let me put the volume down to 1%, 5%. Alright, let me say my hellos. I haven't said hello yet to folks. So let's do that and then we'll get right to class. And if the ad break goes, the ad break. Oh, nope, ad break's here. Just kidding. Just kidding. Alright, I'll see you guys after the ad break. Wah. Okay, we're back for real this time. We're back for real. I'm looking at my frames. They're not dropping. Everything seems green. Everything seems good. So hello everyone. Hello. We're finally ready to start for real. Let me go ahead and say our hellos real quick, and then we'll yap for a bit about the Artemis mission, because they're back. The astronauts are back. And then we'll get into our 1970s decade study. I'm pretty excited. So let's see what we got here. We got Saribot, our rock. We have Matthew, you're first. Fagooby, you got your sticker. Folky got your sticker. And Ghosty, hello. Hello, you're exploding. And Owen, hello, you're on the teal mobile. We love to see it. And then Ghosty's lurking. Thank you for the lurk. And you got your sticker. Beeplebees, you are in fact first, if you ignore all the other people before you. Hello. We're getting through the buffering at this point. Let me see. Oh yeah, get your double stickers if you haven't already. Big thanks to the ancient aliens for helping NASA with their spaceship so Artemis 2 could happen. Beeplebees asking for a mauling. Sorry, I meant contemporary aliens. There you go. There you go. You know, good old Gleep Glorp and Glorp Glorp. You know, thank you for helping out. Helping out the team and stuff like that. They're helping with the burns, you know. And for the most part, it was all NASA. It was all the Artemis team. But they were helping with some of the burns to make sure that, you know, the ship was getting itself reoriented, you know, properly. So big shout out to Gleep Glorp and Glorp Glorp. Big shout out to them. And then let's see. We're shouting out NASA. Looking at the emotes. And then Mega Bronson, thank you for the 29 months. Oh my gosh. Dang. A supporter since day one. You love to see it. So thank you for that. You got your sticker as well. And with that, we are caught up on chat. So let us get to the classroom. Hello. Yeah, you can see me watching the NASA stream. Look. They're on the raft. They're getting helicopter lifted. So pretty cool stuff. Let me put them on like 1%, and then we'll direct away. But hello everyone, hello, it's me, Babinka Bear, your local Sun Bear art history teacher and educational streamer. And today we are doing our decade studies. For those that haven't seen this before, we are studying each decade since I want to say the 1900s, but to be honest, we started on the 1920s. Because we thought that'd be good enough, but little did we know it was not. So we are gonna circle back to the 1900s though. We are. But we've been studying every decade since the 1920s. We've been studying art movements, current events, aesthetics, fashion, car design, all for the sake of getting good at time guesser. Yep, time guesser. So one would think that by the end of these studies, sometime in July, because I'm trying to do this every 2 weeks, that we'll be pros at time guesser. So far, it hasn't... It's helped. It's definitely helped. It's helped me familiarize myself with things like car design, you know, and stuff like that. But, you know, we've noticed that there are a variety of factors in play. Even if you are really good at identifying different car designs throughout the decades, sometimes there's different nuances. Like sometimes you know, a middle class area or a like not middle class area might have cars from the previous decade. And we're also encountering things like, you know, the styles that we are so used to associating with each decade don't really crystallize until the middle of the decade. So you might see some fashion that looks 1970s, only to find out that it's actually early 1980s. So that's what we're going to be exploring for today. The decade for today is the 1970s, but also I just want to yap. So I just want to yap about the Artemis program, who literally right before the stream started today. Hold on, let me play some music. There's a playlist on Spotify called All Out 70s, so let's give that a listen. Starting with ABBA. We're starting with ABBA. Congrats to the astronauts for splish splashin', right? Right? It was, okay, I will say that it was pretty edge of my seat, pretty anxiety inducing, because for those that haven't been following it as closely, so the whole journey has been really awesome. For those out of the loop, the Artemis 2 mission is the latest NASA mission with the intent to send people to the moon. This mission did not send people like on the surface of the moon, but people were going around orbit around the moon, and then they just came back. First time watching Reentry live? Yeah. The last one for a big moon mission like this was the 1970s. But I haven't really been watching any of the other missions, like the ones to the space station, the ones where it's just like experiments to like go into like Earth or low Earth orbit, stuff like that. So this is the first time I've seen like a Reentry. So I was freaking out a little bit because, you know, the things in my head are like, oh no, what if it's like, knock on wood, another like Columbia or another, well, I guess Challenger was like when they first like, you know, rocketed up into the atmosphere, but it was pretty nerve-wracking. But talking about it like with you guys and talking about it like with like connections, like friends and family and stuff, it was very like, well, this is kind of like business as usual for them, right? It's like the comparison I made last night when I was like talking about like, oh, the trip to San Jose was like a 45-minute flight, which is less than a lot of my commutes to work, if I'm being honest. But I had recently, just this past year, developed a fear of flying due to just gestures vaguely at the state of things at the moment. Before that, I didn't really have a fear of flying, but recently acquired it, and I was kind of freaking out, like, during that flight. I was like, oh no, like, what if we don't make it? And then over the intercom, the pilot came on, and he's like, yeah, hello, we're gonna be landing in San Jose in about 30 minutes. This is the 7th time we've done this flight today. We're expecting good weather. All right, later. Like, you know, it's like, oh, for them, that's just business as usual. They're just thinking about when's their next like snacky break, you know? Why am I panicking? This is business as usual. So same thing with like, you know, these like re-entries. One of the biggest like fears is like, oh, like the re-entry temperature is like hot. It's like half the temperature of like the surface of the sun hot. You know, like human beings are not meant to survive those temperatures, but the ships are meant to. They are built to have these heat shields that defend against like that like scorching heat, right? So it's just more of a matter of like, you just got to count on the math and the technology to kind of help in that regard. There's also there's the heat shields, but as I had also learned today when I was watching the stream, there's also like certain angles or certain mathematics that go into it to kind of lessen the load on those heat shields. So it's all like a finely tuned machine, so to speak. To the credit of many, like, so like the NASA employees, the engineers, the astronauts themselves, right? So it's all a finely tuned machine to make sure that they get home safe and don't burn up in a big fireball. And they did it. They got back safely. I was so happy to see that splash. I was so happy. That and like basically like Beans and his family were also watching as well. It was one of those like, you know, when you watch Mad Men and you see the scene where they're watching the moon landings, I guess slight spoiler alert for that. They're watching the moon landing, and it is this big like uniting factor of like, wow, so many people around the globe are watching this too. I mean, hopefully, right? Because even though NASA's an American company, it's like, come on, it's the first time that humans, fellow mammals have like reached that far into space. So pretty exciting stuff. So I'm glad they made it safe. Right now, they are currently, if we switch over to NASA, they're being helicoptered over. They're being helicoptered over to this ship. They said the name multiple times. It was like the USS John Murtha or something like that. So they're gonna get their medical checks, make sure they're in tip-top shape, because one thing to consider is that when you're in space, there's no gravity. You could just like float and you know, just chill, right? You could just chill and float. But once you get back to Earth, dastardly gravity is enacting upon your body once more. So so it's gonna take some getting used to for those astronauts to get back used to, like, you know, walking, just being in, like, having that gravity force on you, not just being able to float and stuff like that. So 31st night, September, no, 21st night. You know, the Filipino club that I used to be in like college, they had a little shuffle for this song. Technically, you could do the shuffle to any song with like 4/4 timing, but I remember specifically we learned it with this song, so I always think of that shuffle. It's like a relatively easy dance move to do, you know? Ready? Hiya, say do you remember? Here, I'll teach it to you. Front, front, back, back, front, back, triangle, hop. There we go. You can do it to it. You can do it. Ready? Ready? Front, front, back, front, back, triangle, and a hop. You did it. See? And you guys think that I don't teach you anything. No, why are you farting? Why are you farting? Spice. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. I've just been like eyes peeled to the screen to watch the Artemis 2 mission stuff. I'm happy that they're back. Yippee! Lots of moon joy. That's a new term that they've coined lately to express joy of like all the moon missions, right? Moon joy. So Artemis 2 didn't land on the surface of the moon. That's going to be Artemis 4. And Artemis 3, I believe, is the dress rehearsal. Is they're going to do everything short of actually landing on the moon. And then 4 is going to land on the moon. And then 5 is going to start building a lunar base. Which is crazy to think about. It's cool in terms of, like, progression in civilization and humanity and all that stuff. Bear-manity sometimes. Maybe next mission we'll have a bear. Who knows? Cool progression. I can't help but be a little bit pessimistic about, like, you know, oh, what's gonna happen once I have that moon base, you know? Like, yeah, they're gonna be researching stuff, but it's also like, we have, like, a private company now that has its eyes set on space travel, so it is a little, you know, I won't get into too much, but it's like, this should be for the sake of, like, exploration and learning more about our universe, but who knows what dastardly things might crop up in that regard. But for now, let's enjoy it. For now, let's bask in the success of the Artemis 2 mission. So yeah, that's my spiel. That's my spiel about what I've been doing lately. Not much else, honestly. Just work. And research. Most of my day today was just finishing up some last minute research on today's decade study. Because we usually do time guesser at the end of the stream whenever I do decade studies, we might actually just get right into the middle of things. Especially because one thing that I forgot to mention is that I am experiencing a teensy bit of a migraine right now. It's pretty normal. I get this around the time that Aunt Flo visits, if you know what I mean. My buried. So it's normal, but it is pretty like annoying. So we might just get into the swing of things. We might do our decade study. We might yap for a little bit more, and then we might call it somewhat early. By which I mean, like, you know, instead of going for 3 hours, we might go for like 2.5 or something. But I also want to get in as much as I can. I want to yap about as much as I can before I lose my voice too, is another thing. So let's see what we got here. Let me... Also, I'm realizing that Spotify isn't playing that loudly, so let me up the volume on that. There you go. Oh, it is a lovely song, too. Alright, let's get right into the swing of our decade study then. So we'll start off with current events. We're actually going to go in a different order compared to past decade studies. So, let's see. Xiaopi, hello, you're just in time. We're about to start our decade study. So yeah, we're gonna go in a different order. We're still gonna start off with current events, but instead of going straight to art movements, we might actually leave art movements for the last portion because, y'all, there's a lot of art movements in the 70s. It's kind of like a cool, like, contemporary art renaissance. They landed the crew on the ship? Nice. Wait, let me check it out. Yeah, look at that! Look at that! That one's Victor, right? You'd think by now I'd know all their names. There's Victor, there's Christina, Reed, and, oh no, what's the Canadian guy's name? Was it Jeremy? But nice, they're landing on the ship. They're gonna go through, like, I think a medical check. And then I think there's supposed to be like a press conference. No, no, not the forgettable Canadian. Wait, you know where I could get some of that info? Artemis mission timeline. He's not forgettable. He's not forgettable. It was Jeremy. It was Jeremy. I was like, it's a J name. It's a J name. So it's Reed Wiseman, who's the commander. There's Victor Glover, the pilot, and then the 2 mission specialists who are Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen. So they used to quarantine them in the Apollo days. I forget if they still do that. Yeah, because it's one of those, like, there's no telling, right? There's no telling, like, what kind of space, like things can be lingering on both, like, the spacecraft and, like, the astronauts didn't have any contact with space itself, right? At no point did they do a spacewalk outside of the craft, but I'm supposing, like, the spacecraft itself, right? The longest and most expensive flight to Florida to San Diego ever. For real. But also, like, coolest too. They got to get some, like, really cool pictures. I actually have one used as my background, as my wallpaper now. So and it's funny because my wallpaper used to be like a really sad picture that I would use for, like, for lack of a better term, shit posting with Beans. Like when he says something that, like, makes me like, it's like, you know, like, oh no, we can't go for takeout. I would just, like, go to my desktop and it would just be that sad picture. It's the tomato creature. Let me see if I can get that picture. Tomato creature, sad, Twitter. Just like me, they long to be close to you. Here, it's this one. It's not this exact picture, but, like, this is me whenever Bean says we can't get takeout. It's like, that used to be my wallpaper for the longest, because I would just, like, you know, Windows key D and then go to the desktop and it would do that. But I've since changed it to one of the Artemis 2 pictures. So you know, no more shit posting for me for a little bit. For a little bit. Me when I can't get a sweet treat. Me when I can't get boba. Even though literally yesterday we got takeout. We got vegan Mexican food and we got boba. Like, I'm spoiled, y'all. I'm spoiled. Nice. Let's see, what was I gonna say next? Yeah. So, there's a press conference coming up, with the well, I don't know if it's actually gonna be the astronauts, because I feel like if anything, they should be recovering. They should be recovering, right? So, I don't know if the press conference is gonna be with the other staff. So, yeah. Let's see. But yeah, we are gonna go ahead and get into... Actually, yeah, let's go ahead and get into our decade study. So like I said, we're going to go in a different order. We're going to be doing current events. We're going to be going into fashion and car design afterwards, and then art movements, because there's, like, so many cool art movements that happen in the 70s. And I feel like I had kind of written off the 70s because this is actually the beginning of contemporary art. We have that shift from modern to contemporary, and I'm going to explain what that means. But first, let's go into some current events. Also, let me know if the music is too loud or anything. Also, I associate this song with The Simpsons, because this is, like, Homer and Marge's song. It's like when he first saw Marge, when they were, like, college students, I think, this song played, and it was very cute. But then they retconned it to where they met earlier, like, as kids and stuff. And, I guess that's okay, but it's, like... But I don't know, it's cuter that they met in college, in my honest opinion as a Simpsons fan. But okay, I keep saying let's get into it without having gotten into it. Let's get into it. And I will allow, usually I'm like, no, keep it on topic, you guys, keep things on topic, but if you guys get any other, like, NASA updates, let me know. Speaking of NASA, so let's go over current events current events of the 1970s. So yeah, let's go ahead and start our look into the 1970s. You're gonna notice on my Figma over here, my Figma thing over here, that there's a lot of overlap with the 60s. This is kind of just like, it's kind of the reason why I wanted to use Figma, is because a lot of things tend to overlap. Like a lot of things from say the late 1920s will overlap with like the early 1930s and so on and so forth. And there was just a lot of it, particularly with like art movements. Dang, you can tell I didn't do my tongue twisters because I'm tripping over my words a lot. So yeah, we'll do current events. We'll head into fashion, which I've now recombined into one section. It used to be that I would do 2 sections, women and men's fashion, but the site that I use for men's fashion only goes up to the 1960s. So at this point, I'm like, we might as well just combine them back together. And then cars, and then we'll get into art movements, aesthetics, and all of that, including when we get into aesthetics, we're actually going to go into the aesthetics wiki, because I do feel like they do a decent job of like going over some of the different aesthetics that you would see during this time. And I'm definitely now a fan of a cool one called cassette futurism, which I'll go over. There's a point with The Simpsons where you just have to accept that each episode is its own canon. For real, for real. Because yeah, like I'm still so used to like, you know, golden era, golden age. Ooh, yo, this smacks. It's ABBA. But all right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So 1970s. To kind of ground things with US presidents, this is the era of Nixon. Nixon was kind of like the very beginning of the 1970s, followed by Ford and Carter. They were more so like the tail end. With and you know what's really interesting is that typically you see, well, not typically, it kind of ping-pongs with US presidents in terms of like, sometimes there's a president that just completely dominates the decade. Here, that's not the case. There's actually like a fair split between like these 3 presidents of like who, like which was like the Nixon era, the Ford era, the Carter era. If you go back to like the 60s, it's mostly like JFK, LBJ. And because JFK was assassinated before the end of his term, it's mostly LBJ, with like Eisenhower and Nixon kind of being at like the tail end of things. So, and then I believe the 50s, this was also like somewhat of a fair split, Truman and Eisenhower. Once we get to the 80s, it's all, nope, that's 90s. It's mostly Reagan. Like look at Ronald Reagan's like term. It's like literally like from 81 to 89. And yeah, Carter has like the beginning and H.W. Bush has like the tail end, but like it's mostly Ronald Reagan. So, which is where everything goes to hell. But anyway, we're going to get to that. Cassette futurism is a vibe. I love it, right? It's very like, I immediately think of like Space Odyssey. Just a casual reminder that Ronald Reagan is the devil. Yeah, 100%. 100%. We also have another devil here today. We also have a picture of another devil. There's actually multiple. Politics aside though, so yeah, this is the era of Nixon, Ford, and Carter. Tricky Dicky, he's also not that great, but I'm talking about Margaret Thatcher. But all right, politics aside, current events, this decade is marked by the end of the post-war economic boom. So like there was a lot of like prosperity economically with like the end of World War II. It's already been, what is it, like 25 years since then? Right? So it's about 25 years since the end of the war. So there's beginning to be some stagnation. There's also an oil crisis that I didn't research that much into, but it would affect a lot of things such as cars and manufacturing. But around 1973, there's a oil crisis. You do see like during this decade a lot of the continuation of a lot of the things from the 1960s, such as like a lot of social progressive movements, a lot of cultural things that we kind of talked about before, with like the 1960s being this like era of like questioning civil rights, war, or rather being anti-war, questioning religion, clothing, and how like now it's okay to have like casual fashion. Everyone doesn't have to be wearing a suit, you know? Let's see, what else? Music, drug use, that kind of stuff. Like things get, for lack of a better term, funky. So the 1970s is kind of a continuation of that. And then a lot of technological advances. A lot of the stuff that we are like, with each decade, things become more familiar. now it's really getting familiar because this is the beginning of like personal computers. Computers have been a thing since like decades before this, but like personal microcomputers, as they used to call it, are now a thing at this point. So cassette tapes, VHS, VCRs, portable camcorders, those are all becoming a little bit more popular during this time. Astronomy. So it's fun that we're talking about the 70s, the day that the Artemis 2 crew has returned, because 1972 was the very last moon landing. We haven't landed on the moon since then, right? Artemis 2 just kind of flew by the moon. Well, I don't want to say just. They did so much. They did so much, y'all. But yeah, we're not scheduled for another moon landing until at the earliest 2028. Over 50 years. So it's been over 50 years. So 1972 was kind of the last time that we did that with Apollo, I believe, 15? Is it 15? I know 13 was the crazy one. Apollo 13 was like the crazy one, you know, with which spawned the movie with Tom Hanks. So, or Tom Cruise. Wait, Tom Hanks. Tom Cruise? Tom Hanks. One of the Toms. Anyway. So other than that, here are a couple of other big things that happened during this decade. The Watergate scandal, the resignation, which led to the resignation of Richard Nixon. So as we mentioned before, Richard Nixon was the president at the beginning of this decade. Watergate, I didn't really understand until I kind of was like doing my research for the decade study. So Watergate was basically, Nixon, or rather Nixon's people, were kind of holed up in the Watergate Hotel, and they were spying on his opponents, the Democrats. It wasn't necessarily this that led to him, you know, being like resigning and all that. It was the cover-up. It was like the cover-up later on where like he was asked under oath, like, you know, did you do this? Did you like spy on your opponents, the Democrats? And he said no when he really did. So that was kind of what led to him. I believe he got impeached, right? It gets kind of complicated because being impeached doesn't necessarily mean you like lose the presidency, as we see from our current president. Like, it's just more of like, oh, you are like being accused and tried for a crime. Anyone who knows that a little bit better, feel free to chime in on chat, by the way. But yeah, it was the cover-up that kind of led to the impeachment, and then to him basically resigning from the presidency alongside his VP, Spiro Agnew, who, if you watch Futurama, they are respectively a head and a body without a head, respectively. So yeah, that's Richard Nixon. This is actually him after his resignation doing the double peace sign as he gets into the helicopter and flies away from being president and all that. So alongside that, Margaret Thatcher became the first female prime minister of the UK, became pretty infamous in her tenure. I was also like curious, like I did some like research on this as well, as to like, why is it that people consider her the devil, you know? And it seems like a lot of it is that she basically like defunded, if I'm understanding this correctly, kind of like defunded like a lot of manufacturing jobs. So a lot of cities that depended on, say, like coal mining, manufacturing, they like fell into disrepair. Like they couldn't make money anymore. So I don't know kind of like the nuances of that. But yeah, like she kind of like led her tenure led to a lot of people essentially like becoming homeless, and just losing a lot of like money. She also had a lot of legislature that was like, it was stuff like she took away free milk for kids in elementary school. It's almost like comically evil, you know? If I recall, she looted lots of government safety nets. Yeah, a lot of like support for like underprivileged like communities. She took that out. Very like, you know, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps kind of thing. Where it's like, yeah, like, well, I think the Europeans are all asleep right now. I think right now is a late night for them. But yeah, like it seems like she took out a lot of like this, the like government safety nets, as you said, Matthew. So, it was also stuff like, I know that the Irish and Scottish aren't particularly fond of her either. It was just a lot of stuff like that. It seemed very similar to like, well, I haven't done a lot of research. It seems very similar to like the Reagan era that we're gonna see next. I was gonna say next semester, next decade study. So that's Margaret Thatcher. Japan started to experience an economic boom by this point, but you wouldn't really see it that much until the 80s and 90s. Mao Zedong in China ended up dying. Margaret Thatcher jump scare. Hello, Nap. Yeah. We were just talking about how, like, our next decade study is going to have one devil. And for this decade study, we have another devil. So, yeah. Speaking of devils, we also have, because I'm Filipino, I also do have to talk about Ferdinand Marcos. So this is Ferdinand Marcos Sr. He was basically like the Filipino president at the time, but due to fears of quote unquote communist insurrection, he would declare martial law. So the Philippines would be in martial law for, I forget how many years. And this is a very kind of like mixed, people have mixed feelings about this, because a lot of Filipinos of this generation will say stuff like, oh, like things were very peaceful during this time, but other people will say like, well, a lot of people also got murdered during this time, and quote unquote like disappeared. It's a lot of what you would see with like future Philippine politics with like Rodrigo Duterte, arguably with Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who is the current president. Bongbong Marcos, which is very, very typical Filipino nickname, by the way. But yeah, so this era was known for like its martial law, and it's interesting, like as we do these decade studies, I'm starting to get really excited for like the decades where, you know, like I lived through, like we're gonna get to the 1990s. Here we go, the 1990s. We're actually gonna be able to chime in on like, yeah, like the news says this, but I remember this. I remember being a baby cub, like pooping my pants and all that, all that good stuff. But my parents were born in the 60s. So, well, their childhood was in the 60s. My dad was 1960 and my mom was 1966. But that means a lot of their youth was actually during the 70s. So a lot, like, they were actually able to talk a lot about, like, certain events that happened. Like, for example, we're gonna get into something called the People Power Movement. Actually, when was that? People Power Movement. And my dad was actually, like, there. He was literally, like, there. 1986, so we will talk about that. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and get a head start on that. Let me go ahead and put this here in the 1980s. There we go. People Power Movement. My dad is somewhere in this crowd, y'all. My dad is maybe he's even the guy on the lamppost. I don't know how we got there, but my dad was there. Yeah, actually, like when I was just glancing at that Wikipedia article, it says it was the end of the 20-year dictatorship. So that means that Marcos was like the president for over 20 years. I'm looking over at NASA's like not Discord, NASA's Twitch, and it looks like they ended their stream. So yeah, other than that, let's see. So we have the beginning of martial law, increased conflict in West Asia, also known as the Middle East, the Cambodian genocide, Khmer Rouge with Pol Pot, and then the Iranian Revolution. So a lot of like things are happening all over the world, but also like when is there a decade when a lot of things aren't happening all over the world? But suffice to say, lots of unrest, the continuation of more like decolonization efforts all across the world. We unfortunately don't have enough time to talk about all of them. Once again, this is kind of like a broad brush that I'm like painting with here. But yeah, those are just just to like kind of put into perspective what's happening during this time. All of that basically. So you have the end of the Apollo 2 missions. The end of the Apollo missions. I don't know why I said Apollo 2. I also put some other things here in terms of science and tech. So the discovery of Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis or africanus, I actually forget, but this is kind of like the if you've never taken a anthropology course before, Lucy, as she has been affectionately dubbed, is a sample of a species called Australopithecus. Once again, I forget if it's afarensis or africanus, but it's kind of like the earliest known hominin that we had known up to that point. I think since then they've added more species, like I think Sahelanthropus is one of them, and I only know that because of Metal Gear. the weapon to surpass Metal Gear. But basically, like, at the time, this was like the earliest known hominin ancestor. So this is the direct line that would eventually lead to you humans. I know not all of you guys are humans. Some of you are grill and cat boys. But you know, the big shout out to the humans. You know, they did just complete their Artemis 2 mission and whatnot. You also did get the Voyager missions, which would photograph a lot of the outer planets of the solar system, such as, you know, the big red spot of Jupiter. Actually, Voyager's the one that's still flying out, isn't it? Voyager's, he's also a fake Grand Order servant. Though I will say Voyager makes me emotional. We have, like, you know, in like a million billion years when humanity is either out in the stars or dead on the pavement, we're still gonna have Voyager exploring the universe as like the last remnant of human civilization and whatnot. You know, little Voyager, he's gonna keep on trucking for us, hopefully, maybe. But yeah, so that was happening. 1970s is also the birth of modern computing and the first microprocessor and accessibility to personal microcomputers. This was micro at the time. Because before this, the computers were like the size of entire rooms. This is the processor. I didn't do, like I said, I'm painting with a broad brush here. So like, if you ask me for like details on any one of these things, it's like, that has a cassette. That's a cassette thingy. That's a camcorder. That's a VCR. I know what they look like. Ask me about the technology. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm pretty sure this is a processor. But what does it do? Beep boop. Beep boop, beep boop. And yeah, here are some computers. What does it say here, actually? Is this just a key smash? Like, I don't know that word. My name is Colpants. I don't know that word. I don't know that word. Krissa, I don't know that word. Lovely. We love Apple. The mighty microcomputer. This time is also the invention of and popularization of VCRs, VHS tapes, Betamax tapes, cell phones. Yes, cell phones. I didn't include a picture here. Of course, it's a far cry from like the smartphones that we have nowadays. Oh, Queen. I love Queen. It's a far cry from the smartphones we currently have, but, you know, cellular phones, like portable phones, were a thing by this point. Car phones as well. And then, what did I put birthday? Birth of modern video games as well. So, you did see things like Pong! Pong! And then here's Pong as well. This I kind of like underestimated because, like, you know, growing up as a 90s kid, it's like, video games were already a thing, right? Like, not only that, but we started to have like 3D graphics in our video games. So when you look at something like Pong, it's like, oh, big whoop, you know, like it's a bunch of pixels and you get to like knock a ball back and forth. But if you think about it, in the point of view as someone from like the 70s, someone who doesn't like has never experienced video games, this is the first time that not only can you watch something on a screen, well, of course TVs can do that, but now you can control something on the screen. Like think about that for a second. Like I said, it's hard to do that because like we're in a world where video games already exist and are very fancy. But back then it's like, oh, you know, like I'm watching stuff on the TV, but I can only watch something that is broadcasted. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that if I move the lever here, it controls the thing on the screen and it is responsive to my movements? And not only that, but there's also this independent entity that is affected by whether or not I like block it with my pixel or not, you know? Like, that's like so insane to think about that. Like, you know, we didn't have this before. Now you can control the pixels on the screen. Crazy business. And Pong was everywhere. It was huge. Pong is the only video game my mom has beat me at. I don't even know if my mom's played Pong. I think I've given her like a stab at video games before. My dad's definitely beaten me at multiple video games, such as Tekken. I can't wait till we get to the 90s and I can talk about like personal memories. Like, yeah, my dad put me in front of a computer with Tetris on it one time, and the rest is history. But yeah, so there's Pong, and then that's actually a good transition into pop culture of the time. So let's delve away from the politics, but also the really cool science and tech advancements and into pop culture, because now we get into a little bit more familiarity. So let's see, pop culture. In terms of big music movements, you got disco with bands like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Hey, do you remember? You also got the Bee Gees. You got hard rock like Queen, and is kind of like linked with heavy metal. So Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and Kiss. Admittedly, I can't say I've listened to too much. I've heard like, you know, all of like the big top 40 hits, right? Like if we're talking about Earth, Wind, and Fire, then like September, right? And then if we're talking about Queen, as much as I say like I love Queen, it's mostly like their top hits that I know of, but they also have a lot of top hits. By the way, we do have an ad break coming up. So let me just wrap up our talk on music, and then we'll take an ad break, and we'll come back to talk about movies, TV shows. But I can't say that I like, if you were to play like the most popular Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath songs for me, I might be able to know what they are. Kiss, I feel like I have heard a couple more songs by them. But yeah, but this is also the era of glam rock, where androgyny, you know, was kind of the look that you wanted to go for, and I kind of dig it. Here we go again, my. But all right, guys, we do have an ad break coming up. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys over in the cub corner. I'm going to get some water. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about more 70s pop culture, fashion, and then we're going to get into some art movements. I'm pretty excited for that. So, all right, see you guys in a bit. Okay, we're back. We're back. Sorry for the delay with the ad. It didn't activate, so I had to like manually put it in. But Rin, hello, Emolge, hello. How you doing? We are doing our decade study ads. Good evening, George. You guys are back from ads, right? Unless you guys got pre-roll, in which case I could wait for a little bit more while I drink me some water. Yeah, we're doing our decade study where we're focusing on the 1970s this time. So we can actually go to class. Let me make sure that I have you guys on my other screen. Yeah, for those who just joined us, we just went over the current events. That's right. Happy birthday, George! For those that don't know, it's George Chungus's birthday. Hold on, let's give him a shout out. George Chungus. There we go. There we go. He's old. He's old. You're old. Have you attained unk status, as the kids say? I don't know what I would do once people start calling me that. Happy birthday, old man. You summon the cats. You summon the cats. You guys should check out George's streams, by the way. He animates cool things, and he was playing Signalis. How was that? Does that mean they call you Auntie? I feel like Auntie has like a different like what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't know, it has a different vibe, you know? Auntie is like something you say affectionately to the lady that like gives you free treats, you know? And Unk has kind of like a more demeaning, you know, connotation to it. That's the word I was looking for, like connotation to it, where it's like, all right, Unk. It's like the same thing as like, okay, boomer, but like for Gen Xers and like millennials, you know? So what's like a insulting shortening of aunt? It's like, okay, T. Like, get demeaned. No, I don't mean to demean you. I don't mean to demean you. I very much respect George, because look, my favorite Senzawa song? She hasn't streamed in years. Well, also, guys, look, check this out. When we go back to the Cub Corner, look, pay attention to the animation. Look at that. You know who made that? George! Good evening, George! It's him. It's him to thank. You have him to thank when you guys consume the classroom. Would it be Karen? Yeah, you know what? It would be Karen. It would be Karen. 100%. It would be. We got Unk and Karen. You could call me that. You could call me. But I also feel like Karen has the connotation of like someone who is like, can I talk to the manager? You know, instead of someone just saying something that's like old. It's like, oh, back in my day, my dad sat me down in front of a computer with Tetris on it, and the rest is history. But being Karen? Oh, no. No, but I haven't asked to see the manager. Not yet, at least. Not yet. Yeah, we're doing our decade studies on the 1970s. We just went over current events, politics, and whatnot. We are now on pop culture. So that includes video games, but there's also a couple of more things. Let's zoom in. We went over, hey, why are you laughing at me? I'm not... I haven't asked for the manager. You know what, Bean Cubs? Can I ask for your manager? Who's the manager of the Bean Cubs? I guess that'd be me, huh? That'd be me. Alright, so, movies. Ooh, this is that one song. This is the one song where she goes, like, really high. Minnie Riperton, right? Whee! Yeah, movies. There's a lot of really cool movies that come out during this decade, you guys, including the Star War. The War of Star. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The War of the Star. That part. So Star Wars is from the 70s. Jaws, Godfather, Grease. Grease is the word. You heard? Exorcist, Rocky, Clockwork Orange, which is actually one of my favorites. I do like Clockwork Orange. Harpsichord Enjoyer, hello, you got your sticker. And then Kung Fu movies as a whole also became popular during the 70s, and this was popularized by Bruce Lee. So yeah, the Kung Fu fighting. Yo, Matthew, thank you for gifting a sub to George for his birthday. It's a good birthday present, I would say. So yeah, all these movies came from the 70s, and a lot of them very much hold up. I feel like we've like talked about quite a few movies, like things, series that still hold up, and all of the ones that I listed here I feel do still hold up. Moving on to TV shows, you got the Brady Bunch. This is the story of a lovely lady. The Jeffersons, MASH. I've only really watched the Brady Bunch, if I'm being honest. Thanks, Matthew. I'll only need this emote, the one that you made. What about the other cute emotes, the ones that I made? What about that? But yeah, thank you again, Matthew, for gifting that. That's also kind of wild to think about that. Like, I'm pretty sure I credited you with the creation of that emote on Twitch, because there's a way that you could like credit like who made the emote. I'm pretty sure I did, and it's kind of wild that like you made it, but you're not able to use it unless like you're subbed to my channel, right? Like I made, for example, like I made the emotes for Mega Bronson's channel. Does that mean that if I wasn't subbed to his channel, like I wouldn't be able to use my own emotes? Well, I guess that is also the case with Discord, right? Like it's not letting me use my animated like emotes because I don't pay for Nitro anymore. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy how capitalism works? These are okay too, I guess. I think they're more than okay. Like, same with Matthew. I also made Matthew's emotes as well, right? Don't you guys think my emotes are cool? Like, do you guys like my emotes? Let's see. Look, the grill. What the heck is that? All right, so TV shows. How many of you guys have like watched any of like these like 1970s TV shows? Because like I've honestly only seen the Brady Bunch, and that's because of Nick at Night. So like if you guys are familiar with the Nickelodeon channel, Binko, what the heck is a channel? Nickelodeon, once the kiddos are asleep, they would play Nick at Night. So they would play like older shows like Brady Bunch, Bewitched. I don't remember if they played the Dick Van Dyke Show, but there was also like the basic cable would also sometimes have older shows like the Andy Griffith Show, Beverly Hillbillies. I Love Lucy was like a big one that I was like really into as a kid. So like you could like, even if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you could still like watch a lot of these like classics. Let's see. Thank you for the big emote, Matthew. Yeah, that one was made by Hux. And I think that one's really cool because of its animation. Le Grill. I did see MASH. Like, that one was also like late night for I think basic cable, but I can't say I really watched the Jeffersons that much. Mary Tyler Moore, stuff like that. I was more so into like the kids programming. Three's Company was another one. SNL, by the way, started in the 70s. I don't know why I thought it was like the 80s and 90s, but yeah, it got its start in the 70s. So yeah, animation, children's programming. This is more so what I saw a lot of. So I mentioned this when we went over the 60s, but Scooby-Doo started off in the 60s, like 1969, but it got a little bit more popular during the 70s. During this time, you also saw a lot of like what I usually kind of dub as like kind of Scooby-Doo knockoffs. So you had like what is it? Jabberjaw? Wait, Jabberjaw. Where like the mascot was different, but like all the other characters were kind of like samey compared to like Scooby-Doo. If we have any like, you know, 70s cartoons and enjoyers in the chat, feel free to chime in and be like, actually, this character is totally different from Shaggy, and Jabberjaw is a shark and not and not a dog. Actually. I was always annoyed by Nick at Night as a kid because I wanted to watch cartoons, not boring adult shows. I know, right? Like, little did we know they were classics. I don't know why little me was like okay with the Brady Bunch, but like once like the Dick Van Dyke Show turned up, I was like, all right, this is where I stop. This is like, I'm getting off this train. I'm going to bed. I missed the portion of spamming our own emotes. Mega Bronson, no worries. I was just talking about how like I'm I think I'm pretty sure. Am I attributed as the artist for those emotes? If not, it's okay. But it's only because I was talking about like, oh, George made one of my emotes, but it's one of those like, oh, if he isn't subbed, I don't think he could use those emotes. And it's like, aw, Sag. He made them. He worked so hard on them, right? Right? Back when SNL was the start of a comedian's career instead of the end. Oh my gosh. I was annoyed by the Wonder Years because it signaled the end of Simpsons. That's so real, though. That's so real. I think as a kid, I was okay with watching Brady Bunch and Bewitched, but only because Bewitched had like an animated opening. So it kind of fooled me into thinking it was an animated show, but then it was live action. Yeah, you're attributed as artist on everything. Thank you, Mega Bronson. Thank you, thank you. But no, yeah, same with like the Wonder Years. Like, I think I would have been more interested in, because I heard that it's actually like a really good show. But for me, I was like, this isn't animated. This isn't for me. So yeah, there's also Schoolhouse Rock, by the way, which like I feel like I also caught some of these. I don't know if it was on Cartoon Network or like I forgot like how I watched it, but I do remember a couple of the songs like Conjunction Junction, what's your function? You know? Sesame Street I definitely remember. Like I feel like actually wait, Elmo wasn't here. Was Elmo a later addition to the team? Because I was gonna say like, oh, I remember like Elmo's World, but that's more so like 2000s. But like you got Snuffleupagus, you got Big Bird. Actually, early Big Bird looked kind of freaky. Have you guys ever seen like what early Big Bird looks like? He isn't as like fleshed out. Here, let me get a picture for you guys. There, look at early Big Bird. He's like missing like a percentage of his head. And I feel like it isn't until later that it's like, oh look, he has more face, you know? Elmo was later. Ah, okay. Wasn't that PBS? Oh, you're right, it is PBS. Yeah. Why did I forget about the existence of PBS? They gave us so many things. Watch what you do with that stank attitude. Immediately changes the channel. Elmo wasn't big until one puppeteer piloted him. Now his now famous persona. Oh, okay. He has the head dent. Yeah, exactly. The crack epidemic in Bigford Art. That's crazy. No, he's doing fine. He's doing fine. See, he had the surgery. He's fine. Let's see, we got Grover. Who was on today's Connections, by the way, I think, or yesterday's. Elmo came later and became so popular, a lot of fans were upset that he started eclipsing the other characters. Oh, here I thought that Elmo was, like, always part of the group. But now that I look at it, like... Oh, look, isn't that Elmo's dad? That's Elmo's dad. And then, Oscar the Grouch, Bert and Ernie, they're roommates. I actually don't know the name of the dog, if I'm being honest. I know Snuffleupagus, because his name is fun to say. I'm gonna be so real with you, I don't know who the cowboy is. I don't know who the cowboy is. And also the Count. Once again, I came in during the 90s. I came in during the 90s, so some of these guys might have cycled out. Oh, and Cookie Monster! Cookie Monster. Did you guys watch The Best in Jest? Where it's Connor trying to guess Cookie Monster. And the way they got to it was like imitating his voice. And Lana was like, no, go deeper. Like, oh, hello. Okay, now what do you love? You love something very much. That clip was so funny. Oh my god, they were roommates. The Count throwing up gang signs. No, he's not. He's counting. Like, I mean, he is from the street. He is from the street. Anyway, Conjunction Junction. What's your function? But yeah, so those are some of the, like, children's programming. There was also the Muppets, Josie and the Pussycats. Fat Albert. Hey. Hong Kong Phooey. I don't know if I watched that one. And the Super Friends. You guys remember the Super Friends? Hold on, Super Friends. Why didn't I add this earlier? You guys remember the Super Friends? It's like the Avengers before the Avengers. Let me actually make this smaller so I can fit it here. There you go. Oh my god, this doesn't have the Wonder Twins. What the heck? How can you have the Super Friends without the Wonder Twins? You gotta have Wonder Twin powers activate. Form of a bucket of water. But yeah, on a serious note, this was kind of like the precursor to like the Justice League. But it's a lot more like campy and like lighthearted, you know? Back when like Batman had like the shark repellent. Or was that the live action series with Adam West? But anyway, look, it's the Wonder Twins. Form of a bucket of water. See, the censored count is still one of my favorite videos on YouTube. I actually don't think I've seen that one. Now to play the waiting game. Oh yeah, Adam West! And now we play the waiting game. Who is this Adam Wee? God, I love how unhinged like Adam West was, especially like on Family Guy. I miss him. Anyway, Jabberjaw, and then video games. Yeah, so this is the beginning of video games. So you have Pong, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Oregon Trail. However, in the 80s, Oregon Trail wasn't the version that I played on stream a couple of weeks back. It was more so like just text-based. And back then, like the main change was that like when you are shooting for like food and stuff, like you're shooting those poor little animals for food, instead of like a visual where you're like aiming your gun, you have to type out bang or like wham or like other onomatopoeias, right? So it was mostly text-based. One might say precursor to the modern visual novel, except with less ara ara. So yeah, that's a little taste of the pop culture of the time. George, you got your sticker. You got your sticker. Oh yeah, and then I also included this disco ball because this was the era of disco. Yeah, you have you also have early home consoles in the 70s with the Atari 2600. Oh yeah, I actually didn't. Why didn't I put that on here? Mostly because my like the earliest that I can recall in terms of consoles is like the SNES. Even though there's also the NES. But I did forget about that. So we can actually add that in right now if we want. So Atari 2600. There we go. It's a big Atari. Okay, let me close out some tabs. Okie dokie. So that's current events, pop culture. Instead of going over to art movements, we're actually going to end off with that, and we're going to go straight to fashion and cars. So let's do that. Fashion during this time is a lot of it is kind of a continuation of the 1960s, with a lot of kind of like flamboyant fashion. But even more so, actually, arguably, like it goes even further than what you saw in the 60s. So as a review, let's go back to the 60s. So we did divide it into women and men's fashion. A lot of men's fashion was inspired by bands like the Beatles, space age kind of stuff. And then there was also a style called mod style, which is short for modern style. It's kind of this style right here, where you have like this kind of like tubular silhouette. Let's see, men, people leave. No, come back, come back. Like hippie fashion was very like loose and free flowing, right? So you didn't have like those kind of those silhouettes where it's kind of like form fitting, at least with like hippie fashion. But mod was kind of the opposite in that it was still kind of like form fitting, but with a little bit more flamboyance, right? Flamboyant patterns, flamboyant like extra things like frills, vibrant colors. So like basically like color wise, this was kind of like a big departure from the previous decades, and you kind of saw a continuation of that with the 70s. However, it got even more free flowing for some people. So during this time you did see some advancements in mass production. So there was more use of synthetic fabrics, and thus clothing became more affordable. So this, plus with this interest in like self-expression, led to just like an explosion of new fashion. So basically what that means is that like if you go back to like the 1940s and 50s, a lot of the outfits, especially for men, are kind of samey because a lot of it is like suits. But here you could still wear a suit, but like, you know, you would have like a flamboyant t-shirt underneath, or you would have like a certain kind of print on the suit. Let's see if I can find any other examples that I put here. Or, you know, like you were playing around with different fabrics, you know. So we did see some more of that. And then the typical silhouette at the time for all genders was kind of loose at the bottom and tight on top. So this is where you start to see bell-bottom pants. So I think this is a good example right here. So tight because you do have like your fitted shirts and your like vest and stuff, but the bottom would have like these big old tapered like big old pants. Look at my pants. Early 1970s fashion. Oh yeah, so a continuation of like 1960s hippie fashion. So with a lot of bold colors, flowy silhouettes. But another thing is that because of the 30-year cycle of nostalgia, it's gotten kind of advanced nowadays with 2020s, where now we're being, was it nostalgic for 2016? Chuck Norris showing up in Bruce Lee movies wearing bell bottoms. Exactly. So, because of the 30-year kind of gap, and now 1940s was the new nostalgia that people were getting back into. So you still had like the 1960s hippies fashion, but also with a little bit of like glamour mixed in. So things like, kind of like, oop, I keep on accidentally moving these. Yo, Dreamy, hello. How you doing? Thank you for the raid. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? My name's Babinka Bear, for those who don't know me. I'm your local Sun Bear art history teacher and educational streamer. Right now, we are doing what's called our decade studies, where we learn a little bit more about about different decades. But enough about me. How are you doing? You were just chatting. What were you guys yapping about? Let me know. I'm curious. Man, we're talking about bell bottoms right now. We're talking about fashion. We're gonna talk about cars and eventually some art movements as well. So, Jinan, hello. How you doing? Yo, what up? Hello. You actually did a little karaoke, and I yapped about old community stuff afterwards. Oh, cool. We love talking about old community stuff. Nice. Yeah, if you have to raid and run, if you need to like, you know, rest your voice, feel free. If you guys want to stay behind, no worries at all. Like I said, we're just talking about the 1970s. Though I am curious if you are staying behind on what are some songs that you sang? What was there like a certain genre, or were you just kind of going off of vibes and requests and stuff? Let me know. Hello, Zako. You, yes, me. It me. Binka. Yeah, let me know. I've always wanted to do karaoke streams, but I'm always so shy. I need the house to myself before I dare to do some karaoke. I do also have like a karaoke list too, where it's like, okay, some of it is gonna be like Tempest. Need to finish up work so I can go to bed, but it was nice popping in for a tiny bit. Yeah, it's nice. I like seeing you around, Jinan. Like, I know that I've been seeing you in like Sklimbo streams, and then occasionally I do lurk in Milky's. Though I do know that she has a new job, so she hasn't been streaming as often. But yeah. My repertoire is all Vocaloid songs for the 2010s. Let's freaking go. Do you have a favorite composer, if you don't mind me asking? Because right now it's just like Kikuo for me, but like, you know, also be thinking about the classics, Deco 27, Mothy, Master of the Hellish Yard or Hidden Yard or whichever one that was. Man, nostalgia. Let's see. You just started singing Walk Upon These Yellow Sands. I was popping for like 5 to 10 minutes for Sklimbo just to check in. Yeah. And also, if you guys want, we also have a check-in here, a 1-point redeem, where you can redeem a scratch and sniff a sticker. And basically it just makes a little sticker show up on the screen, and all the stickers are based off of Filipino treats. So yeah. Rip Milky. No, she's still alive, but she has a big girl job. She has a big girl job now. My favorite of all time is Ai Kotoba, but I think best performance wise for karaoke, World Is Mine. Sekai de ichiban no hime sama. Ah man, so nostalgic, but awesome possum. Yeah, feel free if you want to share any other like highlights from karaoke, feel free. We're gonna go ahead and hop back into the 1970s. We're talking about fashion, but we also just went through current events, world leaders, space stuff, especially because the Artemis 2 mission just finished up shortly before I started streaming today. We went over music, movies, animated shows like the Super Friends, stuff like that, and movies like Star Wars. So now we are focusing in on fashion. We were talking about how the silhouette is a lot looser, with a little bit of hint of like glamour and glamour from like the 1940s as well. So like jewelry, playing around with different fabrics, stuff like that. What else did I put here? So disco, glam, bohemian styles were pretty popular. You also saw at the beginning of what was called like the wrap dress, where like this is kind of a wrap dress. It's more so like inspired by wrap dresses, where like basically it's kind of like a loose fitting dress, but then you put a belt to kind of like have that silhouette, that kind of like hourglass silhouette. And then some versions of the wrap dress are also almost like a kimono in a way, where it's almost like you have to wrap the dress around you. Let's see what else. So ethnic prints, bell-bottom pants, sweaters, sometimes with faux fur. Platform shoes was kind of big during this time as well. I don't know if I have any pictures that feature like platform shoes, but just trust me on this. Just trust me. Oh yeah, and sequins, jewelry, things that were meant to kind of glitter and shine, especially on the dance floor, especially if you're at the disco, the discotheque, as my parents used to call it. The discotheque. In terms of casual fashion, so starting with the 1950s, it was more socially acceptable for people to wear like more casual fashion outside the house, you know? So, you know, like starting with the 50s, you did have like just the white t-shirt that before that was just considered like underwear, like not underwear like for your, you know, for your bottoms, but like literally like what you wear under your regular clothes. But nowadays, especially as we got into the 1970s, it was more socially acceptable to just be wearing a t-shirt. Especially because during this time, unfortunately, I don't have enough samples, but t-shirts did start to have print on them during this time. So, like, if you're familiar with, like, you know, Napoleon Dynamite, like, Vote for Pedro, kind of like in that style. But, of course, Napoleon Dynamite was more so, like, the 2000s, 2010s. But in that style, basically. And then there were also folks that didn't like the flowy silhouette. They found it unflattering on their what did I put? Unflattering on their bodies. So instead they opted for things like translucent fabrics, showing more skin in general. Like this, what you see here, where like people are out here showing their ankles and arms. That was a little bit more commonplace, particularly for women as well. There was also a brief foray into medieval-inspired fashion, so there's little capes and stuff. That's why James Dean was so salacious. Yeah, we talked a little bit about him when we did our 1950s fashion, or sorry, our decade study. This was like the time of like Elvis, James Dean. This trend would kind of like continue with the 1960s as well. Here, like what's called like modern fashion kind of like went against that with kind of like these suits. But like with hippie culture, for example, it was a little bit more casual. So once again, that is like continuing on here in the 1970s. And then for the first time, I think this next part is going to help us a lot with Time Guesser, is that you would see for the first time women wore more trousers, including jeans, more so than skirts. And don't get me wrong, women still wore skirts during this time, and dresses, and some even had hot pants. So hot pants are basically your short shorts of the decade. So this, for example, like this woman is wearing hot pants. And little skirts like that. But you would also, it was more socially acceptable for women to wear pants during these times as well. And that's not to say they weren't wearing them before, but it's just more so that like you're seeing it more often now in the 70s. So men's fashion continued to be a little bit more flamboyant with like vivid colors, decorations like frills, flowy shirts. But you also saw some chunky sweaters, tweed suits, and chinos. And then disco. Oh yeah. So even though it was like socially acceptable to just be wearing like a t-shirt and stuff like that, disco did reintroduce the idea of wearing like 3-piece suits. So like, for example, here, but with a little bit of a casual touch to it. So like there's a shirt under here, or there's like kind of like a button down shirt underneath. So yeah, like you did see the return of suits, but like with a little bit more like flamboyant touch to it. I think I also put matching couple clothes. I didn't include a picture, but it got to the point where like, because glam rock and like glam rock kind of like made it okay in some circles to have a little bit of androgyny. So your longer hair, your like kind of flowier outfits. It got to the point where couples could essentially wear matching outfits with minimal like kind of like changes between the two. So yeah, that's kind of like the matching outfits thing isn't necessarily like a big popular thing that you would see in like, you know, 1970s time guesser photos, but it's more of like things are getting like more androgynous. Like clothes that a man could wear could also be worn by a woman in some cases, and vice versa, as long as it like had pants, you know. So yeah, that's the fashion of the decade. I didn't really look too much into hair, but I do notice that like men definitely have like a little bit more like longer, unrulier hair. You also saw things like beards, sideburns. For women, it seemed like a lot of them were just going for kind of the au naturel look. Oh, but here's a good example, the curls. Your Farrah Fawcett curls was kind of another thing that you saw during the 60s and 70s as well. So big hair all around. And guess what? It's only going to get bigger once we get to the 80s. But we'll get to that when we get to that. As always, I didn't do too much research into the cars, but I did draw them during my free time today. And I tried to do some comparisons to 1960s cars. So these are some of the cars that I kind of picked out. Funnily enough, when I was looking at the 1970s like Wikipedia article of like pop culture and stuff, it did mention Japanese cars, like the Toyota Corolla. And I was like, oh, I guess Japanese cars were starting to become more popular during this time. But I did a little bit more research, and it turns out that like, of course, Japanese companies and Japanese cars weren't exactly like welcome in the US for a while because of World War II. But now, like I said, it's been 25 years by this point since the end of World War II. So, you know, that generation is starting to age out, or those that like, you know, had things like PTSD. It's funny because, like I said, I watched Mad Men with Beans a couple months ago, and there was a specific episode where one of the characters is a veteran of World War II. And, you know, the whole plot of Mad Men is that they work for like an advertising company. So I believe like Honda, or like it was a Japanese company, had figured into the plot. And the character with that had fought in the war is like, oh, I'm never gonna like work with those, you know, derogatory word here that I can't say on stream. I'm never gonna work with them, you know, like those people like killed my buddies and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So of course, like by the 1960s, that was still very the wound was still somewhat fresh. So it's not really till like arguably the 70s and even into the 80s that you do see like these Japanese cars becoming a little bit more successful overseas in the US. Genuine question, why do you think a lot of the mainstream stuff like short shorts on men and full masculine clothes on women went from normal in this decade to taboo and gay in the 2000s and 2020s? That's a good question, because like you also still saw that into like the 80s and 90s. And I actually don't know, because arguably like 2010s is when a lot of people would argue like a lot of people got quote unquote like woke. Like there was a little bit more of like in kind of like bigger society, like more like one might say like progressive thoughts that you would see in like the beginning of the 60s and 70s. So I don't know why like we started to see that shift. That is something worth looking into though, you know, of like short shorts on men. You know, like that was something to joke about. Like I still remember, especially because Malcolm in the Middle recently got a like a revival series. I'm remembering like in the original series, there's a an episode where Hal, you know, played by Bryan Cranston, the dad, he was like in roller skates and he was in short shorts, and that was kind of seen, that was like joked around as kind of like a kind of cringy for its time, right? So like as you're getting into the 90s, that's starting to become kind of cringe. But I think of like Richard Simmons and like those old workout videos where like men were not afraid to wear like form-fitting like short shorts and clothing and stuff like that. So it's a good question, but unfortunately like I can't tell you too much about like why that happened. But yeah, so cars, like I said, it wasn't really till the 70s and 80s where Japanese like brands like Toyota, Honda were really like starting to fly off, and it was more so because US quality led to the US quality got a little bit like crappier. That was a great episode. Yeah, roller skating is serious business. It is. It is. I've yet to watch the revival series for Malcolm in the Middle, but I do hear that it's pretty good. I have heard good things. So yeah, up until this point, it's still American cars that we're looking at. Oh, I didn't write the names of the cars here. Okay, hold on. I wrote it down in my sketch pad. So let me, I'll give you some names right now. Give me un segundo. Okay, so over here, this station wagon over here is the Ford LTD Country Squire. This is 1971. This is mid-70s. Oh no, actually this is still kind of early 70s. So this is the Chevrolet Chevelle. This one right here is the Chevrolet Chevelle. Once again, this is the Ford LTD Country Squire. This is 1973. And then this one is the Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme 1978. And this is a Beetle. Take a look at that Beetle. So in terms of like notes on like the car designs of this time. So if we look back to the 60s, the car design got very boxy. It's very, very like, very geometric, right? Especially if you compare it to like the 1950s where it was a little bit more curvy. Here. So like this one is a little bit more curvy. Look, it's Doc Hudson. There's still some curves in there. You did start to see a little bit of like geometric, like boxy frames with I actually don't remember what these cars are. I think it probably even says it here. Here, it's a Chevy. It's a Chevy. There's also some like decorative tail fins. This is very like streamlined modern, as we called it. So you started to get this like boxy design, and this would become even more boxy in the 1960s, and then it would somewhat continue into the 1970s, but you did also start to see the beginning of some curvature. So here, still very boxy, and this station wagon is known for its kind of like wood paneling on the sides over here. And then it's still, as you can see here, it's still pretty boxy, but if you look at like the fine contours of like, say, like over the headlights, it is starting to have a little bit more curvature to it. And then this also, like the roof is also like a little bit more curvy. It's a little bit of a softer curve. You also started to see some of the designs, like the like trimming and like decorations over here. They're starting to get a little bit more minimal. Same with like the grille design too. Another thing that I noticed too when I was drawing these is that the fender is starting to stick out a lot more. I can tell you exactly why that is. It's because they actually began to realize that instead of making indestructible car, you need to crumple to survive wrecks. Yeah, 100%. That's kind of like the big arguments that you definitely saw with the advent of like the Cybertruck. Is people saying that like, oh yeah, look, it's built to like, you know, it's built to like help the driver from like, you know, dying when they get into a collision. And it's like, actually, cars are meant to crumple. So, like, something like the Cybertruck would actually lead to, like, I guess, extreme whiplash, right? So, yeah, the curve is starting to help with that. Here is, like, late 70s. So you're definitely seeing more of a curvature with that hood. This is something that you're definitely going to see, at least I feel, with, like, 80s cars. Because, to me, 80s cars still feel very geometric. But they do have some very slight curves to them, at least compared to, like, the 50s and 60s. And then here you also see, like I said, the grille is starting to become a little bit more minimal in its decoration. And also the headlights are becoming square. So like here, like the overall like grille design is square, but the headlights themselves are still circular. Here, the headlights themselves are circular, but they're kind of inset into this like square shape. And then by this point, the headlights are just square. I feel like we are going to start seeing more of this in like the what's it called? The 80s as well. But yeah, overall boxy, but with a little bit of curvature. You can dance, having the time of your life. Ooh. I love that part. I love that part in the ABBA song. The ooh. Alright, so that is fashion and cars. So we're actually near the... Okay, I say near the end, but we still have so much to yap about. But now we're gonna get into the part where I love the most, the art, the design, the aesthetics. So I'm trying to think if we should start with art movements or if we should start first with aesthetics. I feel like the art movements might be a harder sell, you know? I feel like that's where we're gonna be getting people that are like, I don't like this art that looks like poop from a butt. So let's start with the aesthetics first. And this one is actually gonna have a little bit more of like live research. Not really live research. Aesthetics form the arts. True. But we're gonna get into. I feel like any conversation about modern and contemporary art gets to that the point where you're definitely gonna have more people being like, I don't like this, you know, which, you know, more power to you. That's kind of the joy of modern and contemporary art, is that like the conversation that arises from the art rather than just kind of like a cursory look at the art, if that makes sense. The rise of mustard brown. Hello, Al Cornelius? Hello, welcome to the class. I'm Babinka Bear, your local Sun Bear art history teacher and educational streamer. And we're looking at the 1970s in an attempt to get good at Time Guesser. So, alright, let's go ahead and get right back into the swing of things with aesthetics. So yeah, we're going to talk about art movements a little bit into the stream. So that's going to include performance art, video art, feminist art, land art, and street art. Where is my section on street? Street art, which I actually didn't cover too much because me and Mega Bronson actually did a whole deep dive into street art a couple months back. So more so I will just link to that instead. But before we get into art movements, here's kind of like a big overview, and then we're going to get into graphic design and aesthetics. So art movements. This is the cutoff point when between talking about contemporary and modern art. Actually, you know what? I'll get back to this. I'm gonna actually move this here, and I'll move this here. So our aesthetics research is gonna be on the aesthetics wiki. So I'm just gonna give you guys some examples of like certain aesthetics from the 70s, and then we'll kind of go into each one. That was last month, Silly Bear. Wait, which... Wait, what? Sorry, I forgot what... I forget what I said 2 seconds ago. Oh, no, too big. Okay, so, some prevalent design aesthetics that you saw during this time was, one is called cassette futurism. And we'll go into detail about all of these, but, super graphic ultra modern. The street art I remember because I saw, oh yeah, Iron Lung, there you go. Super graphic ultra modern, which has a lot of flat shapes and cool colors. Googie kitsch. So when we went over the 50s, we did talk about Googie style, which I liked a lot. We're getting to the point where this style is now considered kitsch. And when I say kitsch, basically what I mean by that is that like it's old enough to be kind of lame, not old enough to be nostalgic. So usually when it comes to nostalgia, things that are 30 years in the past are seen as nostalgic, you know, / positive, because the generation that grew up with that aesthetic, they are now going into their adulthood. Some might even say they're kind of like midlife, no, not midlife, quarter life crisis, kind of. They're looking back and they're feeling nostalgic for the aesthetics that they grew up with. So that's usually like into their 30s, like late 20s, early 30s. Meanwhile, things that are considered kitsch are things that like you see your parents, like this is your parents' like aesthetics, right? So like kitsch is kind of like nostalgic negative, like derogatory. Whereas like, you know, full-blown nostalgia is like nostalgia positive. So because the 50s were only 20 years ago, now it's kind of seen as like cringe and kitsch. But it's also seen more so in kind of the, you know what? I think I've eaten here before. Was this at City Walk? Is this at Universal Studios? This actually feels kind of like familiar. I think this might be a restaurant in Universal Studios. Now that I zoom in. But yeah, like now this is kind of getting into like this is like our parents or our grandparents like design or no, more so parents. This is like our parents' design aesthetics is kind of cringe, but it's also like more so seen in like it feels more like a pastiche. It feels more like a watered down, or even like opposite of watered down. It feels like a more extreme version of the original aesthetic. So yeah, Googie Kitsch, disco was an aesthetic, and then you also get into corporate hippie. Yeah, the how are you doing, fellow kids? Exactly, exactly. So it's almost like these should kind of be aligned. So if you remember from the 60s, hippie subculture and hippie aesthetics were kind of like the big deal, but now companies are starting to latch onto that. They're starting to kind of like get a hold of like an aesthetic and kind of use it for their own needs. And it's kind of funny because like you're kind of seeing that with like why people don't like corporate Memphis style. Corporate Memphis, if we want to like go into that real quick. Let me do this. Corporate Memphis. It's this kind of like corporate like style that is seen as kind of like soulless, but it's actually kind of like trying to harken back to like 90s and 80s aesthetic. So oh my gosh, I can't believe it's Saturn devouring his child, but corporate Memphis. That's crazy. Also, hello Peck School. Hello. We're going over the aesthetics of the 1970s. That is anger inducing. So yeah, it's seen as very soulless, but the thing is it is trying to harken back to Memphis design, which was a style during the 1980s. So what it is that like corporate got like a hold of it though, and that's why it feels so soulless. So that's essentially what's happening here, is that like hippie aesthetics was very popular in the 1960s, but now the corporations and now like the businesses are starting to like kind of appropriate that style. So once it lasts long enough, it turns into kitsch. So that's kind of like the distinction between like, you know, first we get corporate, then we get kitsch, and then once it gets to the 30-year mark, it becomes nostalgic. But of course, we're nowadays we are seeing kind of like a mix of all of these put together, because it does feel like the timeline of nostalgia is starting to accelerate because of things like short form media. That's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother like deep dive to go into. But yeah, that's kind of like that kind of is what the aesthetic timeline amounts to. And then lastly, we have space age and earth tones here. So this is like space age is kind of like a carryover from the 60s and kind of like atomic age aesthetics. Earth tones is kind of getting more into like the hippie aesthetic. So if you want to explore these a little bit further, we do have aesthetics wiki entries for all of these. Cassette futurism is kind of what you see with here, stuff like this, where it's retro-futuristic. It's what we thought the future would look like. Like in the 60s and 80s and stuff, we thought the future would look like this. And it's basically like futuristic, but it still has a lot of the technology that you would find in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So cassettes, VCRs, before we started using like discs and like touch screens and stuff like that. So if you were to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, you'll see a little bit of that aesthetic in play. So here's kind of like what the actual technology of the time looked like. You lift that over to what people thought the future would look like, and you get stuff like this. It's like very space age, but with things like a rotary phone and like dials and knobs, right? I am a big fan of this aesthetic, of course. But yeah, that's kind of what it's like. Oh my god, like it's like a proto Cybertruck. Stuff like this, right? Where you have these like screens that show you all of this like information, but you also have like the brown of like the 1980s, right? Stuff like this. It also feels like very streamlined now that I look at it. You're also seeing a lot of like streamlined like lines, horizontal lines, right? Even the font feels very streamlined. Very nice, very nice. I like it, I like it. But of course, if this is what they thought like the future would look like, you fast forward to like now in the 2020s, which is actually like the future for their time period, and we have things that are like minimalist, touchscreen, no knobs and dials, stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how things developed. So that's cassette futurism, space age. You have a lot of like round shapes, a lot of, once again, like kind of streamlined, right? Like no like hard geometry. Other than here, like the squares are kind of like an example of like kind of hard geometry with like edges and lack of curves. Here, it's the opposite. It's very curvy, right? Oh, look at how, ooh, this is kind of aesthetically pleasing and very satisfying. Look at the curvature of the chair and how it goes perfectly with the curvature of the table. Look at that perfect like little gap in between them. That's so satisfying. Very nice. So yeah, there's all more space age stuff. It's basically like this time did feel very optimistic towards the future, while still incorporating a lot of like their own like aesthetics into it. Now that's hip, exactly. The Space Needle in Seattle. This is very space age. Arguably kind of googie as well, kind of googie. Yeah, let's take a look at these, right? Lots of experimentation with things like waves. You know, this is kind of reminiscent of like radio waves and stuff like that. Yeah, lots of like rounded figures. Yeah, very experimental. And then if you see like the color palette, it does include a little bit of I guess I don't have. Oh no, here, earth tones. You got your wood grain over here, your greens. This is kind of what I was going for with like the eco-brutalism too. Maybe I should put a little bit more wood in some of my like eco-brutalist Minecraft hotel, you know? So yeah, these two aesthetics kind of do go hand in hand. You even have like a good color palette of what to expect from this. Very nice earth tones. Space age. This actually does flow kind of into Googie Kitsch. So actually, I'm curious as to where this is. Where is this? No, there's no like signage. I could swear this feels like something from like Universal Studios Hollywood. Put more wood into it. Exactly. Not with the random emote. Googie, yeah. So we went over Googie when we were talking about the 1950s. So Googie is very like atomic age, space age. It's here we go. It's when we were talking about stuff like mid-century modern. It also has these like very organic shapes to it. But Googie is stuff like this, where you have like the starburst, you have like actually arguably Googie is kind of you do still get like some pretty hard like what's it called? Like you do get some points and like not so much curves but more geometry, more geometrical shapes. But there's also parabolas here, so it's a mixed bag. So yeah, we go back to the 1950s. So Googie is starting to become kitsch by this point. This almost feels very like Nickelodeon in a way, right? Yeah, here we go. These like 50s style diners, right? It kind of has that Googie kitsch to it. And then super graphic. Ultra modern. So this one is a futuristic design aesthetic that was popular from the 70s to the early 80s. Feels Soho, right? It does. This one features... This is another one that you would see in like Space Odyssey and sci-fi movies like Logan's Run. Focuses on interiors that are often white, orange, or rainbow colored, flat graphics, iconography, inflatable furniture, and materials like plastic, plush, fiberglass, and shiny metals. So stuff like this. This definitely feels very 70s. Oh my gosh, this is a 2004 movie. It's Scooby-Doo, Monsters Unleashed, but look at the aesthetic. It's kind of harkening back to like the roots of Scooby-Doo. This is also another 2000s movie. This is Austin Powers, but like it's kind of like harkening back to that. Groove Sanctuary. Pizzicato 5. So yeah, it kind of has that same like kind of earthy tone color palette to it. This feels more Y2K. Oh, this is 1993. This feels a little bit more like Y2K than anything. Oh, groovy. Very groovy. So yeah, overall we're seeing a lot of like kind of these organic shapes, earthy colors. On the other side of the spectrum, you also have disco, where this one is meant to be very like shiny and like with lots of like cool like light effects and stuff like that. Look at John Travolta. Look at him rocking that disco, right? This is the part where I said like some outfits had like sequins on them because they're meant to literally like glitter, sparkle, and shine on the dance floor, right? So you got this with like the disco balls, you got this with like the lighting, this kind of like soft glow effect. And then this kind of goes hand in hand with like the fashion that we were talking about, right? So yeah, here you're not really seeing as much in terms of like organic shapes. It's more so like the vibe of, oh, it's Cher, right? Isn't that Cher? Oh, Michael Jackson! Michael Jackson. Wow. Roller disco. Yeah, it's more about like the soft light vibe to it. Yeah, so disco and then corporate hippie. Oh no, the corporations got a hold of the hippie culture. Corporate psychedelia. Phenomenon emerged out of mainstream popularity of flower power. The aesthetic bridged the gap from pop art and psychedelia of the late 1960s to the earth tones of 1970s. So yeah, this does kind of remind me of what we went over with the 60s. When we went over like this kind of stuff, like the psychedelic art, where you have like all these like clashing colors that are meant to kind of like, they're kind of meant to be very vibrant, right? Justice for MJ, the files cleared up. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. The files cleared him. The people, they framed him. Real. Yuki, hello. Hello. Man, I can't wait for it. Wait, when's his movie coming? When's the biopic coming out? Isn't it soon? Wait a minute. Michael Jackson biopic. Isn't it coming out relatively soon? When's it coming out? When's it coming out? April 24th! It's coming out soon! It's coming out this month! Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. The Michael Jackson biopic's coming out soon. I need to put that on my calendar. Oh, I need to put that on my calendar. Hello, Yuki. Hello. How wow. Yeah, we're learning about the 1970s with the goal of getting good at Time Guesser. Soon! It's happening soon. But yeah, so those are some of the aesthetics of the 1970s. So overall, earthy tones, organic shapes, flat design. Stuff from the 50s was seen as kind of like cringe and kitsch, but stuff from the 40s was like becoming a little bit more like nostalgic. You also had your cassette modern, which I feel will translate more into the 80s and 90s as well. So yeah, I do believe we have an ad break coming up soon. Let's see. Is this mid-century modern? I always get confused with that term, teacher. No worries. So yeah, we can go over that. Looks like I actually still have 10 minutes before the ad break, but I might run it early just so that I can also get a little bit of a water break. But yeah, we can go over that. So mid-century modern, we went over with the 50s. So yeah, it is very similar. It does have a lot of very similar like design trends, such as like the kind of curvy organic shapes over here. You're not seeing as much of the earthy like colors. The colors instead are a little bit more vibrant. So you have your vibrant like cantaloupe orange, sky blue. You have like avocado green. Trying to find some other stuff. There's also it's like more vibrant. It gets a little bit more desaturated once you get into the 70s. So let's see. Yeah, it's the 50s. But of course, like a lot of this design language does translate into like the following decade. So you do still see it into the 60s and 70s as well. So good question. Good question. Whenever I hear Soho, I think NYC represent. Yeah, I know there's like it's like a hotel chain called that, right? Or it's like an area in NYC, isn't it? But yeah, 70s more depressy, beige parent. I want to say, I guess it's more earthy. Though in terms of like current events, there are some depressy stuff like martial law and like, and a lot of stuffs, a lot of stuffs happening. But yeah. So the last thing that we're going to go over for today is art movements, but that's going to be a big chunky boy. So I'm thinking of just doing an early ad break right now. I am able to. I might do an early ad break and then we'll finish up with the art movements. This is the one that I'm kind of like excited the most to talk about, but I also, like I said, know that it might be the hardest sell because we're getting into the realm of contemporary art where people are like, that's art? Question mark. But we'll have fun with it. So I'll put you guys in recess. We're gonna do an early ad break. I'm gonna take a water break, and then we'll get right back to it. We'll get right back to it. Alright? It's alright? It's alright. Alright, see you guys in a couple minutes. We're back. We're back. In Pog form. Did you guys have fun with your enrichment? With your Thunder McKing Ice Cube? I noticed you guys haven't made any progress on freeing him. So, yeah. Nah, it's more so I haven't really, like, made an asset where it looks like he's melting. Anyway, I did get a good water break in, though I do feel my voice is starting to go, so, but I'm also so excited to talk about this. Alright, guys. We have art! We're gonna talk about art movements of the 1970s. Teacher, does ice taste like plastic? Don't worry about it. That's just how ice tastes like. Especially when it's fresh. Don't worry too much about it. You guys are overthinking it, in my fair opinion. Alright. So, last time on Binka Decade Study Z. Fresh ice plastic taste. I'm glad that you guys are taking notes. I'm glad you're taking notes. So you're gonna notice that like a lot of the everything in yellow is kind of like an art movement. It's very much like integrated with the ones that we went over in the 1960s. So as a review, the ones that we went over in the 1960s were minimalism, continuation of pop art, psychedelic art, continuation of pop art, and pop art, minimalism, and conceptual art. All right. Oh, that's right. I stopped the music because it was Queen, and I want everyone to enjoy Queen. There we go. As a review, minimalism is one of those movements where, like, I understand what they were going for, but, like, me personally, I'm not sure how much I like it. But it was a movement that stressed that what you see is what you see. There was an attempt to kind of like remove the artist's hand and put more so an emphasis on the art itself. So if it's an art about color, the emphasis is only on color. If it's online, it's only online. If it's on form, it's only on form. Which is it's deceptively hard to do something like that, to make an artwork that only focuses on something like that and doesn't have any of your own hand in it. So I admire them for that, but even I can't say that, like, you know, I don't know how much I like these. P.A. Mondrian. I think I do like the line one because it does have like almost like an illusion to it, right? It feels like those like illusion books that are like, oh, like actually there is no diamond in this. There is no diamond in this work. It's all a trick of the line, you know? I think I like it for that reason, but I feel like there are other movements where I like a little bit more. We also went over conceptual art, which is less about the execution of an artwork and more about the concept around it. And I was drawing more so on examples from the 1990s that I liked. So for example, John Boscovich's Electric Fan, Felix Gonzalez Torres's Untitled Portrait of Ross in LA, just because of how poignant these artworks are, especially as like a commentary on the loss of some loved ones, right? So even though ostensibly this is just candy, this is just an electric fan, this is just boots, it's more about the concept behind it that I think I admire a lot, right? That looks like the Mexico 68 Olympics logo. Well, now I'm curious. Mexico 68 Olympics logo. Don't stop me. Don't stop me. Don't stop me. Oh, it does. Wait, that's really sick. Let me show you guys. Ah, so we're talking about like the minimal. Oh, no, not that one. Here, the minimalism one, right? Like this kind of resembling like the Mexico 68, which is pretty cool. Like, look at that. The lines seem to vibrate. Yeah, like I think it's pretty cool. Like I understand like why it kind of looks very simplistic, but if you look at it, like the lines really do seem to vibrate just because of the repetition. And that's kind of also what you see in a lot of other minimalist work, like actually more so psychedelic work. Psychedelic work seems to like vibrate. They say it was praised by designers. I see it. I see it. But yeah, so conceptual art kind of like covers like I said, the concept, and that goes very much into this. So, like I said before, the 1970s kind of marks the end of what we call modern art and the beginning of what we call contemporary art. People also call it postmodern art, and nowadays you even hear people say like meta-modern as part of it. But yeah, this is postmodern. Is after the modern era, which modern art does date from the 1880s to the 1960s. And if you're wondering what the difference is, other than just like the time periods, there is actually a difference in terms of like what the art movements broadly cover. So what I put here is that modern art experimented with and questioned the execution of art. So going back to like the very beginning of modern art, you saw Van Gogh and the Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists. So these were folks that were here. Let me show you guys Impressionism. This is kind of like the beginning of modern art because they weren't trying to replicate what you see in a photo. They were trying to replicate the impression or the vibe that you get from like seeing something. So they were getting a lot of critique in their time because like people were saying that like, oh, this looks unfinished, right? Like it looks like you didn't finish blending it, right? You can still see the strokes, and you don't want to see the strokes. You want it to look like, you know, a photograph. But then photos were already invented by this time. Photography was a thing during the 1880s. So, wait, why does it say that my ad is about to start? I literally just did the ad. Let me know if you guys get an ad break or not. You know what? I'm gonna snooze it. I'm gonna snooze it. I literally just did an ad break. What the hecky? Teacher, by the end of this, can we do a tier list once we catch up to the modern day? Yeah, let's do it. I'm down. I'm down. So yeah, if we're going back to the 1880s and like the 1890s and 1900s, modern art started with like questioning like how to execute art. So whether it's with color or with if we go back to like surrealism, Twitch be like no pause, only ad, exactly. Abstract expressionism is still squarely within the realm of modern art because it's questioning like whether you really need a subject in the art or whether you can just show the process of the art being made, right? And that already caused a lot of controversy, right? Like each of these art movements caused a lot of controversy for their day. So now that's modern art. That was questioning the execution. Contemporary art is all about concepts, on the concept of art, of what actually counts as art. So you did start to see that with conceptual art over here, right? So like this is the works of Sol LeWitt's Structures and Instructions, Eleanor Ontine's 100 Boots, where it's like these are just boots and I'm just like putting boots up in different places around the world. Does this count as art? You know, this is basically a cube, but it's all the ways that you can divide a cube into its barest components. Is this art? You know, it's just, you know, cubes. This is a bit more of an egregious example of like this is a chair with a picture of a chair and a definition of what a chair is. Like, is this art? You know, this is one of my favorite ones because it's not even an artwork, it's instructions on how to make your own art. Does that count as art? So whether or not you agree with how they executed it, it's still very interesting in that it's causing these conversations about like, well, yeah, what does count as art? If I was doodling something in the margins of my, you know, astronomy notes back in college, does that count as art? I might be like, no, because it's just a doodle. I did it without the intent of it being art. It was just something I did like to pass the time. However, then why is it the case that when we have marginalia in say like a medieval like illuminated manuscript, that's considered art, right? What was the one that was just a urinal? Yeah, so that is Marcel Duchamp. So that is an example of Dada art all the way back in the 1920s. So yeah, this is Marcel Duchamp's I think he called it fountain. So yeah, this is kind of like harkening back to that. Dada kind of is like arguably like getting into the realm of like contemporary art, even though it was like many decades before that, because they were also kind of like calling into question like what is considered art. But I think a lot of people that dislike contemporary art but like Dada art is that, well, at least there is a manifestation of that. There's photo collage, there's photography that's kind of funky and they're kind of playing around with their techniques, right? It's still very grounded in like techniques. Here, this is grounded in concepts. Where was I? Over here. And then also social implications, because when we get into talking about feminist art, a lot of it is like, what is the social implication of this? And then we also do see a continuation of minimalism in pop art. So it is kind of, it's not like a very strict border, even though I say that the 70s are kind of the beginning of contemporary art. You could argue that minimalism does get into conceptual art, into contemporary art. Conceptual art, as we went over in the 1960s, also kind of like blurs that line as well. So yeah, regardless of how you feel about like the actual execution, I do think the conversation about it is very interesting. I do think that it like, it's an interesting discussion to have. Because now, last time we were going over conceptual art, now we're going to be going into performance art, feminist art, land art, and street art. And a little bit of video art as well. Oh, but we'll take a quick pause because I hear Schnackery at the door. BRB! Okay, you're gonna hear some meow meows. Schnackery! Schnackery is in the premises. All right, let's start first with performance art. So, if people were already kind of like looking at conceptual art and being like, okay, now the artists are getting ridiculous with it, and in some cases, yes, like in some cases, tell him I said, pss, 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 pss. Hey, Schneckry. Pesco says, pss, 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 pss. His ears turned around. He heard it. He heard it. So, one big critique of like conceptual art and contemporary art as a whole is that like, well, who gets to decide what, like, who gets to like facilitate these conversations through this art, right? Because if a poor person from like the streets of Los Bincos were to come up with these same ideas and try to execute it in the same way, would they get the same amount of recognition for it, right? Are we only recognizing these movements because it was like people with money and power that were able to do it, right? That I'm not so sure of, because I didn't really go like too much into the research of like, well, who were these artists? Like, were they rich people that just had a lot of money and power, or did they also like come up from like rags to riches stories, right? Yes. Like I said, I didn't do the research, so it's very possible that like, yeah, like most of them like were only popularized because they had money and power. Because I do feel like it is harder to come by these like rags to riches stories, but I can also argue with the fact that like the ideas that they came up with were very interesting. Like I'm starting to be a big fan of Namjoon Paik with his TV art. So yeah, regardless of how you feel about that, like I said, I do still think that the conversations are very interesting. But performance art is where it gets even stranger. Now this is art that utilizes the human body, incorporates action, and then sometimes also incorporates the viewer. Like the audience is part of this. And I think the biggest example of this is actually a later example. Marina, what's her last name? Abramovics, The Artist is Present. So we'll also get to that with the 2010s, but some contemporary example, or rather some like 1970s examples include the infamous Yoko Ono, right? You also have, let me see here, what did I put here? Yoko Ono, Carolee Schneemann, Joan Jonas, Namjoon Paik, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, and Yayoi Kusama. So Yayoi Kusama, you guys might recognize that name from the Infinity Rooms. Give me a second. Yayoi Kusama, 70s. Here, I'm just gonna Google Yayoi Kusama, because I actually do really like her art. So here's her artwork right now. This is an example of an infinity room where it's basically like a whole bunch of like cool lights and stuff, but within like a mirrored room. So it's a room that seems to go on for infinity. And this is also Kusama herself. She also does like really cool installation art where it's basically like, here we go. Things like these pumpkins in these like mirrored rooms. So these are examples of like installation art, which did get its start in the 1970s, but arguably like I feel like they kind of took on a new form in the 2010s. But before she did art like this, she was doing performance art. Let me get a picture real quick. So here's Kusama back in the 1970s. She had one, what was it called? It was like her with an umbrella. Here, there we go. Walking piece. So this is an example of performance art that that Yayoi Kusama did. Where basically like she lived in New York at the time, so New York mention for for my East Coasters over here. She was walking around the streets of New York in her traditional kimono, but also a parasol that wasn't really a parasol. It was an umbrella that was like designed to kind of look like a parasol, but not really. So it's kind of almost this like pastiche of like Japanese culture, where like it was just a video of her walking around the streets, and then occasionally she would stop and just scream. And then she would just keep on walking. And arguably, I know a lot of people would be like, that's just like a normal day in New York, right? It's like, arguably, that's also a normal day in LA. But for its time, that was considered a piece of performance art. And yeah, Yoko Ono is very infamous too, of like of basically this is one called Cut Piece, which is basically a performance art in which people were invited to come over with a pair of scissors and cut off pieces of her clothing. So regardless of how you feel about Yoko Ono, like this was an interesting piece in that it was one of those like commentaries on like, you know, like the female body, the body in general, and like these conversations of like, you know, why is it that like when we're given a pair of scissors and see a woman, like the instinct is to like cut in places where it would expose her body rather than cutting off, say, like a sleeve or something like that. Stuff like that, which also overlaps with another movement of like what's called feminist art. So a lot of these like artworks did get a lot of controversy for their time because a lot of it had to do with sexualization and like exposing specifically like the female body. But the reason why like arguably that could be seen as like I don't know, very revolutionary for its time is because it's on the women's own terms, right? Which kind of, like I said, goes into feminist art. Performance art also has its roots in Italian Futurism in the 1910s, Bauhaus and Dada, as we were talking about Marcel Duchamp. And then I also put here, this is more so like my own observation. A lot of these note cards I kind of just like paraphrase from my sources, but this is like something that I kind of notice is that it kind of reminds me of contemporary movements like flash mobs and memes. So do you guys remember like within the last decade, or rather in like the 2010s, there was the Harlem Shake and the Mannequin Challenge. I think back then like a lot of people could say that yeah, feminists are what are you woke? Exactly, right? I feel like there are people that would see the Mannequin Challenge and Harlem Shake as like kind of cringy, especially once it got a little bit more into like pop culture, like, you know, like it got a little bit more mainstream. But I don't know, something about like looking at them now, it feels kind of charming. Back then we could just do like wacky little things like that. I do remember participating in like a mannequin challenge with my Filipino club, and it was fun. It was like, how often is it that you can get so many people to just stay still and not talk and not, you know, do anything until the camera was done, right? These are all acts of like big coordination that I feel like I haven't seen lately. It's very possible that like, you know, flash mobs are still a thing. Things like the Harlem Shake, but I don't know. Right now I'm looking at it very fondly. And is that not also its own form of like performance art, you know, but kind of on a bigger scale and like with a lot of coordination. So yeah, I wrote here, if abstract expressionism led to a focus on the body's role in art, this takes it a step further. So like as we were looking at with abstract expressionism with like Jackson Pollock, where is he? Here we go. Jackson Pollock. The whole point of like his artwork is that it's showing the process of the art. Like you see the steps that he made in order to make that art. And even though like he's not personally my cup of tea, I kind of like the ideas that he kind of came up with that. This kind of takes it a step further of like, not only is the body capable of making art, the body is art. And I also like, from one of the sources that I use, I just like this this quote that I got from it. Art should not be separate from life, but an action within life, with all of the accidents and chaos and occasional beauty that entails. So this actually comes from, what YouTube video is this? Is it Vice or Vox? I don't know, The Art Assignment. It's The Art Assignment. So yeah, The Art Assignment is actually like one of the main sources that I've been using for a lot of these conversations about like modern and contemporary art. And I think with each movement, they bring up some pretty good arguments about what that movement is all about. So I definitely 100% recommend them if you ever want to like kind of see a different viewpoint when it comes to like modern and contemporary art. They're pretty good at that. So The Art Assignment is what they're called. If you want, I can even link it in the chat. Come and get your love. Okay, and then I'll probably come back to it in the 2010s, but Marina Abramovic's The Artist is Present is another example of performance art that I thought was very interesting as well. For those that don't know, this is basically a piece where the artist just was at a museum. Like, this was scheduled, they talked about it beforehand, but the artist basically sat at a table and invited museum patrons to just sit across from her. They weren't allowed to talk to her, they weren't allowed to touch her. but they would simply look at each other. And even just from that idea, that does sound like something that could be easily criticized as like, that's art, you know? But it's more so like the actions that happen out of that performance art that like, I don't know, that I consider very interesting, very artistic, because you have these people that have very thoughtful like moments with the artist Marina. And then there was also this moment where like Marina's old like partner, like quote unquote surprised her, but we later found out that like actually they had spoken the morning of. Like, but it was this emotional moment of like them just looking at each other, and like within that time, who knows what was going through their head. It could have been like the years that had passed where they were together, or the years that had passed where they weren't together, and you can kind of like see it on their face. And it's kind of like these thoughtful, like if anything, regardless of how you feel about performance art, it does like encompass all these like kind of thoughtful moments, kind of like what this quote says, like all the accidents, chaos, and occasional beauty that entails. So that's why, like I said, like even though a lot of this is kind of a hard sell for folks, I think a lot of it, like, because it causes these poignant moments, I kind of like it. I like it for that reason. Same with like this art, right? The fan and the candy, right? All right, so let's go ahead and move on to, well, actually, let's go to video art. This is going to be a short kind of like foray into video art. But during this time, even though TVs were more popularized during like the 50s and 60s, it was during the 70s that people started thinking like, wait, what if I incorporate TVs in my art? And of course, this is kind of like, this is definitely one of those like dead giveaways that like, yeah, this is probably like a pretty privileged, powerful, and or rich person that is able to do this, because for its time, who could afford multiple TVs for the sole purpose of creating art, right? Noom June Paik could. So this artist, Noom June Paik, he has some pretty cool art. I think on an aesthetic level, I am a fan of his art. But on the level of like, bro, you got that much money that you could just like use use TVs in your art? That's almost like well, okay, people have done this already, but like making art out of just like the most expensive smartphone, you know? But Noom June Paik, well, actually, let's talk about video art. The advent of battery-powered video recorders led to video art movement, which was coupled with the performance art of the time. So the performance art is stuff that you kind of had to be there for. Beeplebees, hello. We're talking about performance art and video art. And then we're going to get into feminist art as well. Ooh. So performance art is another interesting thing about it is that like you kind of have to be there in order to witness the art. And of course, nowadays you could just record these kinds of performance art on your phone and then like, you know, disseminate it to the world at large. But back then, the main way that you would do that was with battery-powered video recorders. And that's also the only way that we know about like some of these like older performance arts from the 70s. That and photography. But it does get into the realm of like, well, now art can kind of transcend the museum. We're going to get into that when we talk about land art and street art as well. But yeah, like the art can be this ephemeral thing that only happens like a couple of times and then never again. But then you also throw video art into the mix where like, actually it is something that only happens once, but at least now we have a record of that, right? But also the video itself is the art. Like, this is a pretty interesting piece, in my opinion. This is TV Buddha. This is basically a statue of a Buddha. In front of it is a TV, and on the TV is a video. And the video is basically a live video of what this camera is seeing. So it's basically, this statue of a Buddha is watching itself. And once again, regardless of how you feel about this, of like, oh, it's just a Buddha statue, a TV, and a camcorder, right? It does prompt all these questions. It prompts all these like philosophical questions of like, oh, well, what does it mean to like watch yourself? What does it mean for an inanimate object to be quote unquote watching itself? Is it really watching itself? It's inanimate. But what about the atoms that make it up? What about the material that makes it up, right? So I don't know. I think it's neat for that. This one's called Magnet TV. It's a magnet next to a TV, which makes a cool effect, but that also effectively destroys the TV, right? Where now it doesn't have its like arguably sole purpose of like disseminating information and TV shows and news and stuff. Now it's just art. You know, what's to say about that? So yeah, that's something with video art. You have Noomjun Pike. You also have Shigeko Kubota, and then Joan Jonas. Joan Jonas made a an example of video art called Vertical Roll. I'm pretty curious actually if we can get a video of that. So Vertical Roll, Joan Jonas. And by the way, these weren't, as much as video art is kind of its own movement in the 1970s, this isn't the first time videos were used in making art. Because, for example, Salvador Dali was making video art all the way back in like the 1930s and 40s. I forgot what it was called, but he made like a famous like art piece that was all about surrealism. But video art does kind of go hand in hand with like performance art in terms of like holding on to this like ephemeral moment, right? And then vertical roll is also similar in that it takes advantage of the basically that vertical roll effect that you get from like look, it'll show it here, this effect where the video kind of glitches. It's almost like a film effect. She utilizes that. Ooh, it's Michael Jackson. Or is this Jackson 5? Either or. Where it makes use of like pattern and it takes advantage of that vertical roll. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's interesting. I just think it's interesting. This also goes a little bit into feminist art. Actually, give me a second. I need a little bit of a water break. Okay. I just needed a pause because I wanted some water, and then Beans also got me some like rice with like vegan chicken, and it smelled really good. And I just wanted a little teensy bite of it. A little teensy bite. But okay, let's get back into it. So feminist art. also occasionally known as activist art, but this is more so geared towards like the feminist movement as a whole, which seeks to decenter patriarchy. I feel like feminism nowadays like is depending on rice like, depending on like your experiences or your knowledge of feminism, it's very easy to kind of like construe it as like it's easy to misconstrue it by its like most I guess radical components, if that makes sense. Because I remember, I'll just speak personally here. So like growing up, when you hear the word feminism, like in the 90s, it felt more of like, oh, these are like the men hating, like people who just want to like grow their armpit hair out and, you know, be like contrarian towards like culture and stuff. And it wasn't until like much later when I took my first like human sexuality class where I learned that like feminism is really simply just believing in equal rights for all genders. Like that's it. But the reason why like there's a little bit of confusion is, for one, because of its most radical components, but also because of things like, well, why is it called feminism if it seeks for equality? Why isn't like the male component in there, right? And part of it is like feminism is kind of like that, even the naming of feminism is kind of like seeking to decenter men, because men have already been like the center of narratives, the center of like history, the center of so many things. So this is kind of like trying to push it in the other direction. But I also see a lot of people saying that like, oh, just call it egalitarianism and stuff. But then like the response to that is like, well, why does the centering of women feel like such an attack on men? And arguably it's because it's like, it's not quote unquote, like they see, like a lot of people see like the centering of men as the default, right? There you go. Exactly, Matthew. Patriarchy is the status quo. Feminism is considered a challenge to said status quo. Excellent. Like, very nicely, concisely said. I was trying to find a way to, like, concisely say it, but you did it perfectly, so I'm gonna pin that. I'm gonna pin that. So thank you. Thank you for that. I was hoping someone would be able to, like, put it concisely. So yeah, like, basically feminism, like, as a movement and as an art movement was... try to decenter this patriarchy and challenge this like male-dominated narrative. And then it also seeks to challenge the, you know what, this should be its own bullet point. Also seeks to challenge the idea of female objectification and identifying female artists with their traumas. So even when people did talk about female artists like Artemisia Gentileschi, who is this like Renaissance artist, female Renaissance artist, and Frida Kahlo, who is like a female surrealist artist, there's always this temptation to identify them with their trauma of like, oh, Frida Kahlo was in this bus accident, so she can no longer like have children, you know? Artemisia Gentileschi was like assaulted, so like there's always this this temptation to kind of like identify them with their traumas instead of like, yeah, they're an artist and they also happen to be female, you know? So notable examples in this movement were Judy Chicago, who did this these two like examples of installation art. This is Dinner Table and this is Woman House. So this is a house where the kitchen has a lot of boobies on them. But that also, once again, regardless of how you feel about the execution, calls into question of this role of like, why is it the kitchen that is seen as like the most feminine? Why not to play around with that concept of just pasting this big thing that we associate with like femininity of like breasts, right? With the kitchen. Of like, you know, kind of playing around with it, but also almost like scandalizing it of like, you know, there's that sentiment of like, oh, breasts should be hidden because like it's improper for them to be out, even though like I would hate stubbing my toe on the boob floor. Like, oh man. Like, it just keeps happening on the booby floor. But yeah, like going into the sentiment of like, oh, they should be hidden because like people see them as like oh, they should be hidden because they're like objects of like, they should only be seen by like the men that they're close to because they're like seen as these like almost like playthings for men, you know? When biologically the whole role of breasts is to feed children, you know? Like, so like this whole thing that is made to feed children in this area where we make our food, right? Like there's commentary in that. There's a conversation to be had about that. Dinner Table, I believe, is kind of like this dinner setup, but it's kind of like commemorating a lot of female figures in history. So like Sojourner Truth, Joan of Arc, contemporary artists like Judy Chicago, Barbara Kruger. And this is also the work of Barbara Kruger, who is kind of like still known nowadays for like her graphic design. And this like very stark commentary on like women's roles, like your body is a battleground. It's very like if you're familiar with like the Supreme like logo and stuff like that, it's very much like that. And then Miriam Shapiro, who is kind of known for combining together like craft art with feminist art, of using things that are traditionally associated with like femininity, like fans, but then like incorporating like aesthetic craftsmanship and beauty in it as well. I think this is another one by Miriam Shapiro. So yeah. No, why are you guys farting and pooping? Why are you guys farting and pooping? Stop it. Step. But yeah, so feminist art and performance art are very much like very intertwined. And then it also links a little bit to land and graffiti art, which is the last thing that we're going to be going over for today. But yeah, just like once again, same with like conceptual art, is just like this rethinking of like not just how to execute art, but what is art, what counts as art, and what are the social implications? Can art affect the wider society of things? So that's one of the reasons why I consider it pretty neat. So all right, let's get into land art. This is another one that like at first glance felt very straightforward, and the more I researched into it, the more I'm like, oh man, this goes like this has levels to it. It's like an ogre. It's got layers to it, you know? So land art, at first glance, is pretty straightforward. It's any kind of artwork that incorporates the earth, the land, the environment. It's also known as land works, environmental art, and earth art. But yeah, it's anything that like incorporates the use of like the land and the environment itself. Which arguably like it's a pretty flexible movement because you could also incorporate the Nazca lines in there, the Great Serpent Mound of Ohio, cave art, geoglyphs, a Stonehenge. All of this kind of counts as land art. But it also kind of like harkens back to like sites like that, you know? It was a movement that was a reaction against commercialization. So like this idea that like art, it's funny because like I said, like a lot of these art movements in modern and contemporary art is like, oh, it's only well known because people with money and power are able to kind of like promote them, right? This is kind of a reaction against that, even though arguably some of the land art is still done and popularized by people with a lot of money and power. But it was also kind of like against this idea of like, oh, like art is just stuff that is like meant to be seen, sold, and bought, you know? Yeah, exactly. They were doing land art before it was cool. Exactly. But it was supposed to be kind of a movement against like commercialization. Because this is also during the time of like more mass production of goods. And then the idea of the museum or gallery as the center of artistic expression. Basically, it's taking away this idea of like art can only be found in a museum or in like an artist's household. It's getting into the realm of like art can be anywhere. In fact, art, like everywhere is art. It's getting once again into like if we're talking about performance art as this argument for like art should not be separate from life, that life is art. It can also be same with the land itself, with the place, the space. Like everywhere around us is also art in its own way. And that's why I kind of lumped it together with like conceptual art as well. And as well as with like these like the woman house thing that Judy Chicago went for as well, because this isn't in a museum, it's a house, you know? Like this is a site. And I think nowadays this is a little bit more easier to grasp because we have things like art installations, right? Where like the entire gallery itself is like the art piece. But this is kind of like another time where like for its time, this was something to kind of second guess and think about. But here are some examples. The medium of this artwork made it so that the art itself can't be exhibited in a museum unless it's photographed, and it's deeply intertwined with the earth. So here's an example that I thought was pretty interesting. This is made by Walter de Maria. And this is called Lightning Field. So the art isn't the lightning, or arguably it is. Let me get another picture of this actually. So Walter de Maria, Lightning Field. So when there isn't a storm, it just looks like this. It's just a bunch of like lightning rods. It's just a bunch of poles, basically. So this is the art in and of itself. But then during a lightning storm, the lightning is often attracted to like the tallest thing in an environment. So the lightning will strike these poles. That is the art. So arguably like just the poles are the art, but arguably the land itself, not even the land, but the weather phenomena is the art itself. Right, Schnackery? Isn't that crazy? What do you think about it, Schnackery? So this also adds a little bit of ephemerality to it. Ephemerality. And I've been saying this word a lot during the stream. So ephemerality, for those that don't know, just means like this idea of it being there and then not being there anymore. It's temporary. It only happens for a short while and then it's gone. You know, he is correct. What's up, Schnackery? Do you like land art? I think it's kind of neat. Another example of this is this work. Artwork called Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson. So this is basically made up of a bunch of rocks. So he arranged these rocks into a cool spiral that kind of repels the water around it. So you still have like this dry land. However, this is in a spot where there's tides. So there's high tide, there's low tide. So during low tide, you can see the artwork. During high tide, there is no artwork. So that's another example of the artwork being ephemeral. The artwork is there one moment and then it's gone the next. So once again, like, regardless of how you feel about the execution of it, that also is a conversation to have of like, is art art if it's not there anymore? Is art art when it's not even like a permanent thing? It's nature itself, you know? And once again, it kind of like calls into question of like, well, the space around us, can that be considered art in and of itself? Or does it have to have some kind of human manipulation for it to be considered art, you know? So those are ephemeral, but there are also some more permanent examples of land art, including James Turrell's Rodden Crater. So this is still in progress, if I recall correctly. So it's a crater in the middle of, actually, let's look it up together. Rodden Crater. Here we go, Rodden Crater. All right, so it's located here in the middle of northern Arizona. It's a large-scale artwork created by a volcanic cinder cone. And within that cinder cone is all of these really cool structures and stuff. If art is there but there's nobody around to appreciate it, is it art? That's such a wonderful question. That's exactly going in line with what like modern and contemporary art is all about, you know? Is that like, if no one's around to appreciate it, is it still art, right? So yeah, these are the kind of conversations that I love when it comes to like modern and contemporary. But yeah, there's also these like cool structures within the artwork itself, which like still ostensibly I would consider still art, right? But part of it is also like, look at this huge like ceiling into the sky where you can appreciate like the sky as a piece of its own art. So yeah, like I said, this is art that incorporates the earth itself and kind of calls into question of like, well, the earth is also art in its own way. And then last thing we have here is street graffiti art, which I put next to land art because it goes very much in tune with this idea of like, is art still art if it's not in a museum? Is art still art if it's technically a crime, if it's technically not legal? Now, this one I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go super into because we already did a really cool deep dive into this a month ago with Mega Bronson. The Mega Bronson, like, that was a wonderful stream where we were just talking about like, for one, like the idea of like who owns art, or like is art still art if it's out of a museum? Is street art still street art if it's taken out of the streets, right? So actually street art and graffiti art did start closer to the 1960s, but it was more apparent by the 70s. And we kind of touched on this during our stream as well, but one of the first like taggers that kind of got this movement started was Cornbread. He started writing his name in a detention center and a bunch of bus stops to kind of impress his that's so cool, somebody I don't know if he lives there, if the artist lives there, or if he just comes there occasionally to like decorate it. That's actually something worth looking into. That's a great question. But it's called Rodden Crater, so if you guys want to research it, it's here, Rodden Crater by James Turrell. Yeah, great questions all around. Delete group. There we go. So, why that emoji? Why the chocolate? So yeah, like Cornbread was trying to impress like a girl that he liked, so he was just like tagging. So Rodden, not Rodden or Rotten Crater. Yeah, it's Rodden, like Rodden. Exactly. Hello, Twisty. Hello. Welcome. We are talking about the art of the 1970s, and we're ending off on street art, graffiti art. So yeah, Cornbread started off this tradition of tagging, or rather he's the earliest that we know of, because it's very possible that other people were doing it, but he's kind of the earliest that kind of popularized it. So he got that started in 1967. You had people like Cool Earl who started adding like artistic elements like arrows, stars, icons. Julio 204 or 204, Taki 183, Supercool 223, who's one of the first to do large-scale graffiti on subway trains, kind of like this, right? Because once again, legality aside, there's also like an aesthetic component to it where it's like, do you personally find this aesthetically pleasing? For me personally, yes. Because I like the way that the colors are blending together. I like kind of like the shapes that they're doing with this. I like how the text is very stylized, where like you could kind of read it, but there's also things like arrows that kind of decorate the text itself. You know? I like the use of color here. Like, it's very pastel-y against this like kind of green and yellow, right? To me, like within my aesthetic taste, I love this. I dig this. And then once the point where it started delving into the realm of fine art, or at least intersecting with it, is in the 70s, NYC City College and Razor Gallery started having graffiti art shows. So this is when like, okay, graffiti art is starting to be recognized as like its own art form. And similar to land art, street art is intertwined with its environment, and it can't be exhibited unless you photograph it or you move the art to the gallery, in which case that goes into Mega Bronson's question of like, is street art still street art if it's taken out of the streets? So that is something to be left to your opinion, really. That is something that like, I think that's, once again, I keep talking about like the beauty of modern and contemporary art is that like, I can't answer that question for you. That's kind of up to you to answer that question for yourself. And then unlike land art, the legality of the art as defacement and vandalism also plays a big part in the discussion around this, right? So if you're interested in that whole discussion, the VOD to that, to this, like, first of all, here's the Figma for it. But also the VOD for that is on my YouTube VODs channel. So if you guys want that, I think I should just do this. There we go. You can find my VODs right there. So yeah, it was a really good conversation. Fully recommend that you guys check out that VOD. But yeah, that is street art. Very intertwined with land art, as like, is art still art? Or rather like art, the relationship between art and the space, right? Art and the earth, art and the environment. So yeah, this is the era. Once again, art during the 70s is so rich because there's all these questions being asked of art as a medium in and of itself. So I just think that's neat. And there are times where I do disagree with the execution. Like what is this? but we'll have different opinions on it. Different strokes for different folks, you know? You know? But okay, with that, we still have 20 minutes before our last ad break. I'm thinking we do Time Guesser. Let's go ahead and end it off with Time Guesser, and then we'll call it from there. So yeah, let's go ahead and let's see, Time Guesser it up. Let's go ahead and get OBS here. I hope you guys enjoyed this little deep dive into this. Well, not really deep dive. It's more of a broad breadth dive into the 70s. But let's go ahead and test our knowledge now with Time Guesser. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's see if we'll get something from the 70s. Ooh, what's this? So, okay, we have color photography. We have, maybe this is 70s. First of all, I'm seeing lots of men, lots of guys. The men all have like longer hair as well, so maybe this could be 60s, 70s. We're also seeing like this little bus thing over here. Let it be. I'm seeing lots of jeans, not necessarily a lot of bell bottoms, so this look could be like 60s, 70s, and there's definitely something big happening here. Oh wait, here's some cars. It's pretty boxy. It's pretty boxy. Unfortunately, I've just been looking mainly at like American cars, so this doesn't look like the kind of like rectangular cars that we've been looking at, but it's still kind of boxy, right? Part of me wants to say that this is 60s, but let's also try to find a location. Ooh, look at Gothic architecture. It's Gothic. Look, it's broken arches. Are there flying buttresses? I can't really tell if there's like buttressing, but there is like broken arches, spires, lots of decoration. Okay, okay. To you and me. Okay, what does this say? This says Brand Weer Nuit? Op? It's starting to sound like Dutch. Ruthman Steiger, that sounds more like a name or like a brand name. Springt u Mar? The double A makes me think that it's Netherlands, right? Or the Low Countries as they call it. Oh, there's some stuff here. Tehurk? Rabu something? Oh wait, is this a flag? I only see red. I only see red on that flag. Let's say 60s. Let's try 60s in the in Netherlands, in Amsterdam. But let's do late 60s. Let's do 68. All right, ready? Seeing red. I'm always seeing red. Especially when you guys throw things at me. Oh, 15 years off. It was the 80s. It's the 80s. So firefighters, sanitation workers, and other civil servants protesting in Amsterdam's Dam Square. Amsterdam's Dam Square. Against 3.5% salary cuts during the economic crisis of the Netherlands. Ah, so it's in the 80s. Okay, okay. Okay. If you drink then drive, you're a bloody idiot. That feels very British. Something about that feels very British, right? Wait, what does this say? Oh no, it's New Zealand. It's New Zealand. It says New Zealand Police. New Zealand Police. Okay, so Devon 229. Oh, this car. Look, it has those curves. Maybe this is 70s. Last one was 80s, right? So maybe this is a 70s car? Ah, that looks kind of 80s though. Well, we just had a result in the 80s. Mount Edgecumbe, Devon Street West. So we don't even know it's New Zealand. We just don't know specifically where. But let's say 70s. Let's say 76. New Zealand. Where should we put this? Christchurch, Auckland. Let's do Auckland. 76. 20 years off. It's the 90s. It's the 90s. That might really be a 70s car, but like maybe it's just retro. An anti-drinking and driving billboard in New Plymouth, New Zealand. Ah, okay, okay. We're getting the locations right, but it's the time. It's the time. Elephant. It's an elephant. Ooh. Le Grand Magazine de la Bourse. Okay, so French-speaking location, maybe France. France! Alright. We have an elephant. Dang, I wish I knew a little bit more about the... He has a... What is it? A double-breasted coat. When was that popular again? I kind of forgot. Give me a second. We can use our Figma as a cheat sheet. I know I'm kind of just making up rules, but I say we can. Okay, 40s saw some double-breasted suits. Was 30s? I feel like 30s might have also. Let's say late 30s, early 40s. That style of elephant was popular in the 50s? Oh, I know, right? It wasn't until the 2000s that you really saw more, like, big tusks. I'll say late 40s. No, wait, what did I say earlier? I said late 30s, early 40s, right? Let's do 39. No, actually, no, because then we'd be, like, in the middle of wartime. And if this is, say, like, France, I don't know, right? Let's say late 40s, actually. Let's say late 40s. Ah, 53. An Asian circus elephant eating a plate of pancakes. He's eating what? Pancakes. Hide behind that tree. at the Grand Magasins de la Bourse department store in Brussels, accompanied by an Indian-American actor, Sabu Dastagir, during a promotional tour of the circus of the city's landmark shopping center. Ah, okay. Yeah, Pet Mr. Pancakes. He deserves it. See, I told you, 50s elephant. You're right. You're so right. It was a 50s elephant. Ooh, okay. This looks old. This looks like hecka old. I have no idea when this could be. Okay, I'm seeing those little hats that usually associate with like Turkish people or like West Asia, right? So maybe this is Turkey. And this looks like old. This looks really old. So I'm very tempted to say like 1900s. Like 1904, let's say Turkey? Istanbul, not Constantinople? Yeah, a Fez. There we go. No, that's the character from that 70s show. It looks Constantinople old, right? So it wouldn't be Istanbul. It would be Constantinople. Alright, 1904. 8 years off. It was 1912, but it was in fact Constantinople. Not Istanbul, but Constantinople. Muslim refugees crowding the Sirkeci docks in Istanbul to flee the First Balkan War to Anatolia. The Balkan League, comprising of Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro, attacked the Ottoman Empire to seize its remaining European territories, forcing thousands to flee ethnic violence. Ah, interesting. Okay. Hey, that's Dexter. That's the actor from Dexter. When did Dexter start? I feel like this is like celebrating Dexter in some way, right? Well, I'm sure he worked in other things, right? Could this be Hollywood? Could this be Hollywood? Let's go to Bear America, California, Berrywood. Hollywood is here. Let's just put it somewhere here, Hollywood. And then I feel like Dexter was popular during like the 2010s, right? I definitely remember watching Dexter in the 2010s. So it could actually be... Yeah, let's do like 2012. 2012 Hollywood? Ah, 2008. Okay. So we weren't too far off. Michael C. Hall, famously known for his lead role in as Dexter Morgan in the Dexter series, posing at the 60th Primetime Emmy Awards in Los Bincos, despite receiving 5 consecutive Emmy nominations. He never took home the award. No! That sucks. He's so good. Ah, so this is... Wait, I'm curious. Where is this? Oh, this is next to the, It used to be known as the Staples Center, but now it's known as the Crypto.com Arena. It's next to the Convention Center. Oh, that's where it is. And here I thought it was in Berrywood. But alright, not too bad. I feel like we've gotten higher before, but this is fine. Real ones call it the Crypt? That's crazy. I was gonna say real ones call it the Staples Center. Not the Crypt. Alright. So, we tested our knowledge. Still came up a little bit short, but at least we identified a 70s car. Probably, maybe. So, let us mosh. Let's mosh. What are we moshing to today? It's funny because Snow Halation just keeps popping up on my thing, but we've listened to it so many times already. Snow Halation. Is Reckless Fire? LA, California. Or sorry, Los Bincos, California, December. Oh, interesting. We listened to this yesterday, right? What can we listen to? Code Geass. Jiboon, whoa, hey! Open up the pit. Alright, let me stop raids. Alright, so we're gonna do our end of stream mosh pit for new students in the chat. This is our end of stream tradition where all you gotta do is when I play some music, just start spamming your favorite emotes in the chat and I'm gonna make your little avatars fight each other. There's no correlation between how many emotes you spam and who wins the mosh pit. It's RNG, and it's not rigged. Let's do Michael Jackson. I'm so down. I'm so freaking down. Michael Jackson. You think there's like a, yeah, there's like a metal like cover? They don't really care about us. This, ah, I love this song. I love this song. All right, let's freaking do it. They don't really care about us. All I gotta say is that they don't really care about us. Let's freaking go. Oh, this rocks. Get to motion. And I'll see who we can raid into. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Oh, see, my voice is really going. They don't really care about us. Oh, they're not censoring certain parts. Interesting. All I gotta say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Every time you're in the mosh pit, you always win. That's kind of crazy. Let's try it again and see if that holds up. Set me free. They don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Ooh, I know who we're gonna raid into. Please let me win. The streak was broken already? It's Matthew versus Peck School. Who's gonna get it? It's Matthew. It's Matthew. Government. It's only half rigged. Oh my god. Let this be no. We still have time for another round. We still have time for another round. You can never trash me, hit me, kick me. Not me having the longest record. One more round. Yeah, we got this. Really care about us. Ding, 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 ding. Yo, that emote is so awesome, folk. The dance. Oh, this rocks. I love this. Some things in life you just don't want to see. The fan was living. Oh no, I know what you guys are gonna say. There's still enough room. There's still enough time for one more round. There's still enough time for one more round. There's still enough time for one more round. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about it. It's not rigged. It's not rigged. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Say that they don't really care about us. Lobbying, gerrymandering, rigged. Oh my gosh. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. Alright, alright. I'm seeing people getting some med packs. I'm seeing people getting some med packs. Oh, and Shnackery's at the door. Dang it. It's Zako versus Folk. Who's gonna get it? Ooh, it's a close one. It's a close one. And it goes to Zako. See, I'm telling you it's not rigged. I'm telling you it's not rigged. Good job. Good job. GG. GG. Alright, good job, you guys. We're gonna go ahead and raid. we're gonna raid into a fellow bear. And this is Bearware Bear. He's currently playing Minecraft for the drops. So you guys saw Minecraft yesterday, and now we're gonna get Minecraft today. So we always have Minecraft. Alright? So I'll see you guys tomorrow morning for some pixel art, by the way. We're gonna be doing some pixel art, some friends, some buddies. And then I'm going to a party tomorrow, too. I'm probably not gonna party too hard, but I'm gonna go to a party. Boom, my bombs were countered. My streak is safe, foiled again. But yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. But until then, I hope you guys have a good morning, afternoon, and evening. And as always, I'll see you guys when I see you guys. Bye-bye. We raid. Thanks for stopping by. Party somewhat hardy. Exactly. Alright, see you guys next time.